So before we dive into the course, first of all, I want to mention a few things. I can't make any promises, but I can confidently say that this course will give you a job. And what I can promise is that this course will take you from zero to a React expert, a React monster. That I can definitely give you a promise. Now you might be wondering why I'm so sure about this. And the answer is simple. I began learning React.js in 2018 and started teaching it in 2001. I uploaded my first React.js course on my YouTube channel 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, and since then I gained extensive experience by building numerous projects and working with different companies. Now I'm eager to land you a job. Now I know there's a lot of things that I just said. Now the real question is what you can expect from this course. In this course, you are going to be learning a lot, and I mean a lot of things. So now let me explain all of them one by one in one breath. First of all, we are going to be starting from the React fundamental by building 10 projects and countless exercises. Then we will jump to React with TypeScript by building 5 projects and countless exercises. Then React Hook Form with 1 project, Days UI, Shadescene UI, Redux UI, Tailwind CSS, Simple Hooks, Advanced Hooks. Learn everything about Zoostan by building 10 projects. Every single thing I know about the framer motion and also animation in general by building 10 projects, 10 stack query, 10 stack router, and also if you guys don't know, the 10 stack framework which was just launched 3 days ago. And you will learn all of that by building 10 more projects. Then we're going to be jumping into the advanced parts like design patterns in React.js, design system in React.js, React testing, Redux toolkit with 2 full stack projects, Next.js from beginning to advanced level, React Native with projects, and also we are going to be building advanced projects. Okay, that was a lot of things that I just explained. I'm going to break them down one by one in a few seconds, but yeah, this is what you can expect from this course, and this course is still in the construction. You are watching only the first part of this course, and which is about like almost 11 or 12 hours of content. So you are watching the first part of this course, and in the upcoming series we're going to be covering the rest of these topics which I just mentioned. So yeah, I'm super excited and I hope you are too. Now finally, I want to talk about one final thing, and I promise then we will jump to the course. I've mentioned this in my previous courses, in my React Native course and also in my data structure and algorithm course, that if you don't want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, you don't have to. If you don't want to send me a money, you don't have to. If you don't want to follow me on Instagram or in X or Twitter, whatever you want to call that, you don't even have to follow me anywhere. You don't have to do nothing for me. But now if you are taking some advantage from my course, please do not download my courses. If you don't want to follow me here and there, I can totally understand like why. But if you are watching my courses and you are making a career out of that, and still if you are downloading my courses, that's not fair. Like I can't do anything about that because YouTube doesn't have the download feature. But yeah, like if you are watching my content, please do not download that. So yeah, let's get into the course, and I'm gonna make you a React monster. So now let's talk about what are the things that you have to know before jumping into this course. So you only need to know HTML and CSS. That's going to be the main prerequisites for this course. You don't have to know Sass, and this one is optional, but I will highly recommend you to learn Tailwind CSS because in this course we're going to be building a lot of projects, and for the styling we're going to be using Tailwind CSS. So this one is optional, but yeah, once again my recommendation will be to learn that. And also you have to know JavaScript, but in this course you can definitely skip the OOP part. You don't have to know what a OOP is to take this course which you are currently watching right now. And if you guys already saw my old React.js course, where in the world is that? Okay, let me just search for it. There we go. If you guys are wondering like should I have to watch this course before jumping into this React.js course, the video which you are currently watching right now, you don't have to watch this video. And even though I'm gonna private this video, and god damn it, you also have to know TypeScript. I forgot this one. You also have to know this TypeScript. Now let me just say that once again: HTML and CSS, Tailwind CSS, JavaScript, and TypeScript. So that's the only thing that you have to know for watching this course. So now let's get into the coding. So what is React.js? React is a free and open source JavaScript library specially designed for building the user interfaces. Now there are a few buzzwords in this definition. Let me clarify that for you. So the first one we have is open source. So what is open source? Open source refers to the type of software or basically anything where the source code is made available to the public. This means that anyone can view, modify, and distribute the code of that specific thing, and in our case, in React.js. Now, what is a library? A library is a collection of pre-written code that developer can use to perform a common task or add a specific functionality to their applications. Now, what is a UI? UI, or the user interface, is the means through which the user interact with our application. React.js was created in 2011. It uses something called the component model, which we will discuss more in detail in this course, but not right now. It allows us to build modular apps, and finally, there is a saying about React.js that learn it once and write it anywhere. So now let me break all of them one by one. React is the most popular, powerful front-end library developed and sponsored by Facebook. A component is just a piece of the UI that has its own logic and appearance. A component can be small as a button or large as an entire application. We will discuss more about components in more great detail later in this course, but not right now. If you learn React.js once, you will not only be able to build only the websites, but you can also build the mobile application, desktop, and also even the virtual reality. And there are a lot more things that you can do with React.js, so you just have to learn it once and write it anywhere. So that was just a quick intro to React.js, and now let me make a setup for our coding journey. In this course, we'll be using a VS Code for writing our code, and you're more than welcome to use any text editor that you prefer. You can use Sublime Text, you can use JetBrains products, you can use anything that you prefer, but in my case, I'm going to be using a VS Code for writing my code. Now, to install React.js, first we will need to open our terminal. After that, we have to type this command: npm create vite at latest. Hit enter. Next, we have to provide some sort of a name for our project. I'll call mine as React Demos. You can call it like anything that you want. Next, we have to select the framework. I'll choose React.js because we are now learning React.js. And yeah, I'm gonna just choose React.js. Next, we have to select the variant. For now, I'll just use JavaScript because I know there are a lot of people who are watching this course. They don't have the knowledge of TypeScript. So if you are someone who already know what a TypeScript is, you don't have to worry about that. Like, we are going to be still using a TypeScript in this course, but not right now. So yeah, I'm going to just choose JavaScript for now, but later we are going to be using a TypeScript in this course. Now we have to go inside that folder by using a cd command, or you can say the current directory command. Now I'm going to use the code dot and hit enter, so it's going to open there in my VS Code. Now I want you to open your integrated terminal inside your VS Code and just type this command. So you can either use npm I or you can use npm install if you wanted to. So both of them will work totally fine. So it's going to install all of the packages by which our React.js is depends on. So it's going to take a bit of time. I'm going to fast forward the video right now. Let's discuss these files and folders. So the first folder that we have is a node modules folder, and this folder has all of the module and packages by which our React.js is depends on. And later in this course, if we install any third-party packages, that will be also included in this folder. So the next folder that we have is a public folder, and public is the folder where we put all of our assets file like HTML, etc. Next, we have a src folder, and src or source is the heart of our entire project, and we're going to be spending like almost 90% of our time in this folder. So now inside this src folder, we have a few more files and folder. So the first one we have is the assets folder, and as the name suggests, that in this folder we are going to be putting like all of our assets files and folder like images, svgs, external icons, and so on and so forth. Next, we have two other files like app.css and also index.css. So as the name suggests, that we are going to be writing our style inside these files. So we are going to be providing our style for our UI inside these files. Next, we have two more files like app.jsx and also main.jsx. These are something called the component file, which we are going to be discussing later in this course, but you don't have to worry about that for now. Next, we have a gitignore file, and this is a GitHub related file. When we are pushing our code to GitHub, this file allows us to ignore a certain file or folder. For example, like this node modules folder is a huge folder, and if we don't want to push that to our GitHub repository, so we are going to be just putting the name of our node modules folder inside this .gitignore file, and it's going to just ignore that whenever we are pushing our code to our GitHub repository. Next, we have our eslint.config.js file, and this is a configuration file for our eslint. Next, we have our index.html file, and this is the most important file because in this file we have our HTML content, and we also have a div with ID of root. Our React.js will select this element and render all of our content to that specific div. Like, I'm going to show you from where we are selecting that div with a class of root, like with the ID of root. Next, we have our package.json file, and this file is the heart of our project. It contains metadata about the project such as like project name, version, description, and scripts. And more importantly, it lists the dependencies and their version that our project needs to run. Okay, something which we are going to be discussing later in this course. Next, we have a package log.json file. File is automatically generated and updated when install or modify dependencies. It logs the version of all of the packages and their dependencies to ensure a consistent and reproducible build environment, something which you don't have to worry about. Okay, so next we have a simple readme.md file, and this file provides the summary of what our project is about. It usually includes information like project purpose, feature, and aims to accomplish about this specific project. We can also preview that by clicking on this icon, and here you can see, and this is how our preview will look like once we push our code to our GitHub repository. Next, we have our vite.config.js file, and this file is used to provide configuration for the Vite itself. So yeah, that was a lot about the files and folders, and you don't even have to worry about these files and folder, to be honest. And now I'm going to remove all of the unnecessary stuff from our project. Time for the cleanup. So for now, we don't need this public folder, so I'm going to select that and delete that. Next, we also don't need this SS folder, so I'm going to remove that from here. We also don't need the app.css and also the index.css as well. Next, we have to go inside this main.jsx and just remove this line of code. So I'm going to just remove that, save my file. And now finally I'm going to go into my app.jsx file. I'm going to select every single thing from this file, and I'm going to just remove that from here. And next, I'm going to be just creating something called a component, but you don't have to worry about what a component is for now. So I'll just use like const app, and I'll just use my arrow function and return just h1, or you know what, not h1, I'll just return like section, which will say like hello. Now I'm going to save my file, and now to run this code, I'm going to have to open my integrated terminal, and now I'll just use my npm run dev. So it's going to run my code on this port right here. So I'm going to copy that, or you can just hold command or control and click on that. And we are getting this error right here. That's because we now successfully created this component, but we also have to export this so that we can use it in other files. So I'm going to use like export default and then my app. So if I save that, and now I'm going to have to refresh that. So what are we getting? We are now getting our hello right here, which is amazing. So yeah, this is how we are going to be removing all of that unnecessary stuff from our project. So what is component? Components are independent and reusable bits of code. They serve the same purpose as JavaScript function, but work in isolation and return HTML or JSX to be precise. So something which we are going to be discussing very soon. React.js allows us to make our website modular by using something called the separation of concern. So if I ask you to build this UI, so how can you go about doing that? If you are coming from HTML, CSS and JavaScript background, you will first create index.html file, then CSS file, then JavaScript file, and in the HTML file you will put all of your structure for this project. Then in the CSS file you will put all of the styling, and in the JavaScript file you will provide the functionality to it. This process is still a separation of concern, but in React.js we can do that a bit more better. In React.js, we can split this entire project into multiple components, or you can say the parts. So you can either say like components or parts. So if you want to build this project by using React.js, we will start by creating a component for the navbar, and in that we will put our HTML, CSS and JavaScript inside that specific file. Then we will create another component for a search bar, next for the menu, and also for the article, and also finally we will create a component for the card, and we will reuse that card again and again in our UI. So that was about the theory, but how are we going to make a component? To create a component, you just have to create a JavaScript function. But whenever you are creating a component, you have to keep a few things in mind. The first thing that you have to keep in mind is that the first letter of your component name should be uppercase. You can also create your component by either using the function result keyword, or you can create your component arrow function syntax as well. The final thing that you have to keep in mind is that anytime you are working with a component, you have to return some sort of a HTML from that component. Now to create a component, I'm going to go into my app.jsx file, and I'm going to remove every single thing from there because I want to start from scratch. So as I said, that components are just a JavaScript function. So if I just create a JavaScript function by using either the function result keyword, or I can also create my component by using the arrow function. So for now, I'll just stick with this function result keyword. And by the way, anytime you are creating a component, there are two things that you have to keep in mind. Number one, the first letter of the name should be uppercase and the rest of them will be in lowercase. So if I want to give my component as the name of like app, the first letter should be uppercase and the rest of them can be like anything. You can create the as uppercase or lowercase, that's totally on you, but the first letter should be uppercase. I'm going to just give it the name of like app. And the next thing that you have to keep in mind is that from the component, you always have to return some sort of a JSX. We did not discuss about JSX, not right now, but we will very soon. So I'm gonna just write my h1 right here, and I'll just write like hello world. So now if I save my file, this is how we are going to be creating our component. But now we have to tell our React.js that now we successfully created this component. We want to render that to our UI. So to render that to our UI, first of all, we have to export that so that we can use that in other places of our project. So I'm going to just use like export default and then app. So as soon as I do that and save my file, now I'm going to open my terminal right here. I'm going to just use my npm run dev, and here you can see we are now getting our hello world right here from our component. So what's going on? So now we are successfully creating our component, and now we are exporting there so that we can use this component in other part of our project. So where we are using that component. So if I go into my main.jsx file right here, so here you can see we are now rendering this component right here. So first of all, we are now importing this component which we just created right here inside this app.jsx file, and now we are exporting there, and here inside this main.jsx file we are now importing this component and we are now rendering there to our UI. And as I said previously, that I want you to keep in mind this root. Now we are selecting that root right here by using document.getElementById, and we are now selecting that root which is inside this index.html file. As you can see right here, now we are selecting that root. So here you can see we have a root ID, and we are now selecting there by using document.getElementById right here. And now inside that root, like this root, we are now rendering our app component right here. So that's the only reason we're now getting this hello world right here. So if I change something inside that component, like if I go into there, and now I'm gonna just change that to like my own name maybe. Now if I save that, and here you can see I'm now getting my own name. So yeah, this is how we are going to be creating a component. And let me just say that once again, anytime you want to create your component, the first letter will be uppercase and the rest of them can be either uppercase or lowercase, or that's totally on you. And also we have to return some HTML from this function. Okay, so we can also refactor this code to use the arrow function. So I'll just use like const, and I'm going to just convert this function to use the arrow function. If you prefer this way, you can also create your component by using this arrow syntax, or you are more than welcome to use this function result keyword right here. So yeah, this is how we are going to be working with components. Welcome to the first challenge of this course. So here is the UI, and I want you to split this UI into multiple components. You don't have to write any code for that. Just get a pen and paper if you have that, but if you don't have a pen and paper, you can also use some sort of a photo editing software which would allow you to just mark a few things inside this UI and make them as a separate component. And yeah, we also have another part of this challenge which we are going to be seeing in a few seconds, but I want you to go ahead and pause the video and do this challenge by yourself. So if you can do it, then come back and watch the solution. And now I'm going to give you my solution. So I'm going to use a Figma for that. And if you want to use some sort of other photo editing software, you are more than welcome to do that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a component for this burger menu. So I'm going to just create a separate component, and I'm going to put like all of the structure, the styling, and also the functionality inside that component. And then I will also create a component for the navigation. So I'll just create a navigation right here. And excuse my drawing, and also my bad. Yeah, you get the idea. So this is how we are going to be creating a component for the navigation. We can also split this entire navigation into multiple components, but we don't have to. Like, this is going to be enough for this navigation component. We will put our logo inside there. We will also put our search field, which will allow us to search our stuff inside this Wikipedia. And finally, we are going to be also providing our create account and also the login. And we also have these three dots, and I don't have any idea what the hell these three dots do. Okay, so that's going to be my second component. Next, we are going to be also creating a component for the banner. In some situation, we would want to show this banner, and in a lot of times we are not going to be showing this banner. So yeah, this is going to be basically my primary component. And there is a big difference between like a huge component and a small component, which we are going to be seeing inside this course, but not right now. So this is going to be my third component for the banner. Okay, and also we are going to be creating a component for the sidebar, or you can just give it the name of like aside if you wanted to, but I'm gonna give it the name of like sidebar, and I guess that's gonna be fine. Okay, and also we are going to be creating a component for the appearance, so I'm gonna also mark that as a separate component. Okay, so we can also split this entire UI into like nested component as well. We can also create a separate component for these radio button if you wanted to, but we don't have to do that. Okay, and also we are going to be creating a component for the header. So now let me just highlight that right here, just like that. So this is going to be basically our header, and finally we are going to be creating a component for our main content. So this is going to be basically our huge component which will allow us to render all of that content right here inside this Wikipedia. Okay, like once again, we don't have to create a component for all of that. We can put all of that entire logic into one component if you wanted to, but that's not going to be the ideal way to create our website or our apps. So that's why we are going to be splitting this entire UI into multiple components. So yeah, that was the part 1 of our challenge 1. Next we have to create a new file called grid.jsx, and inside that file we are going to be creating our grid component by using the function declaration syntax. After that we are going to be refactoring that code to use the arrow function instead, and finally we just have to render that into our app component. So once again, give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a components folder, and I'm going to give it the name of like not tsx but jsx, and I'm going to use my RAFC, so it's going to give us all of that code, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just create a function, and now I'm going to give it the name of like grid. It's not going to take any perimeter, so I'm going to remove that, and finally we only have to return our h1, and which will just say like grid or hello world would be fine. So I'm going to save my file. Now we have to export this component so that we can use that in other files. So I'm going to be using like export default of grid. So now I'm going to save my file. Let me go into my app.jsx component, and let's just register that component right here. Okay, so if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our hello world right here, which is looking amazing. But I'm going to go in there and refactor this code to use the arrow function. So I'm going to remove that and change that to const, and also make that as an arrow function. So now if I save my file, and still we are getting that same result, which is saying hello world. Okay, so yeah, that was our first challenge in this course. We usually create a separate components folder, and we put our components inside there. So I'm gonna just create two components with the name of like greet or greeting.jsx, and also add.jsx. And by the way, you can give it any name that you prefer. And now I'm gonna just create my greet component right here, and I'll just return my h1, which will say hello, or yeah, hello would be fine. I'm going to save my file, and now I'm going to show you extension which will help you a lot. So I want you to go into your extension area and just search for React.js, and once you do, here you can see I want you to install this extension in your VS Code. Just install this extension, and it's going to give you a lot of snippets. Okay, so throughout the course I'm going to show you a lot of snippets which you can use, but by the way, if you want to use that, so you have to install that in your VS Code. So this component took a lot of time to write. Now in this component, I'm going to just use RAFCE. Okay, so you just have to write there, and once you hit enter, so here you can see it's going to give us the entire boilerplate of our component. Let me just show you there once again. You just have to write RAFCE and hit either tab or hit enter. It's going to give us that entire component right here. So if I save my file, now that we successfully created our add component and also our grid component, and by the way, we also have to export that so that we can use it in other files. So we have to just use export default and then grid. Okay, so if I save my file, now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to register them inside our app components so that we can see them on the screen. So I'll just remove this h1 from here, and I'll just use my grid first of all. And as soon as I hit enter, here you can see it will automatically import this. So if it didn't, you have to import them manually. So now I'll just close them like this. And by the way, this is how we call our component. This is how we register our component. This is how we export them. And this is how we call them. Okay, so if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our hello right here, which is coming from this grid component. I'll remove that from here, and I'll also render my add component, and if I hit enter, so it's gonna automatically import that. Now I'm gonna save my file, and what are we getting? We are now getting our add right here. So we can write like anything that we want, so I'll just write like something cool, and now if I save my file, and we're now getting what something cool right here. So yeah, this is how we can create a separate component folder, and we can put our entire components inside there. Welcome to another challenge. So in this challenge, you're going to be creating three components and a lot of JSX inside there. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a header.jsx file, and inside that file you're going to have to create your functional component with the name of header, and inside that header you're going to be returning the header element, and inside that header element you're going to be creating h1 which will say like welcome to my website, and also you're going to be creating underneath this h1 you're going to be creating your navigation, and that navigation will have three anchor tags. The first one will say home, the second one will say about, and the third one will say contact. So that's going to be the first part of this challenge. Okay, so if you want to give it a shot right now, so you can totally go ahead and give it a shot, but now I'm going to explain these two and then I'm going to give you my solution. The next thing that you have to do is that create a footer.jsx file and create your functional component inside there, and it will only return the footer element, and inside that footer element you're going to be providing a paragraph which will say like copyright 2024, or it should be 2025, my bad. But yeah, you can provide like basically anything that you like, but in my case I'm going to specify like copyright 2024 or 25 and my website, and that's the second part. And now for the third part, you're going to be creating your main component, and that main component will just return your main element, and also inside that main element you're going to be creating your h2 which will say like main content, and now underneath that h2 you're going to be creating a paragraph, and you can like basically put anything that you prefer. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and then I'm going to give you my solution, and basically you're going to be just importing that and putting that right here inside the app component. So now let me just show you all of that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my header.jsx, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE for that. Save my file. I'm going to remove this header from there and provide my h1 which will say like welcome to my website. Okay, so that's going to be the first thing. Next, we also have to create our navigation, and inside this navigation we're going to be creating a three anchor tag. So if I just use like this a and times 3, so it's going to give us this anchor tag like 3 times. So for the first one we're going to be providing a home, and for the second one we're going to be providing a about, and also for the third one we're going to be providing a contact. Okay, so if I just write like contact and save my file, so it's going to format there for me. I'm going to go ahead and go to my app and register my header component right here. Okay, let's just import that and register that here. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we're now getting what welcome to my website, home, about, and contact. So that was the first part. Now in the second part we're going to be creating a main component. Okay, so I'll just say like main.jsx, and inside there we're going to be creating our RAFCE, or you know what, it should be a main, you know what, you can like basically give it any name that you prefer, but in my case I'm going to give it the name of like main content and change that to main. So I'm going to copy that and let me just place that right here. Okay, and I'm going to also use the h2 which will say like main content, and now underneath there we're going to be creating our paragraph which will say like this is the main content, and now I'm going to save that. Now let me just go ahead and go to my app and register my main component right in here. And now here you can see we're now getting like main context content. There we go. So now if I save my file, and now we are getting like main content, and this is the main content which is looking amazing. Now for the final component we're going to be creating our footer.jsx, and now inside there we're going to be using our RAFCE and remove this div and change that to footer. Okay, let's just provide our paragraph which will say copyright 2025 my website. So now if I save my file, we also have to register that inside our app component like so. Okay, and I'm going to register that, save my file, and now we are getting our copyright 2025 my website. So that was another challenge about the basic component. What is JSX? JSX allows us to write HTML in React.js. JSX makes it easier to write and add HTML in React.js. So this is how our JSX looks like. So first of all, we have our component, and inside this component we are now returning some HTML. Now I know a lot of you will ask me, Hussein, like, why can't we just call it HTML? Why are we calling it JSX? JSX simply means JavaScript XML. Behind the scene, we are working with JavaScript. This is just the illusion of HTML. This is not HTML code. Behind the scene, our React.js compiler will compile our code into pure JavaScript. So don't believe me? Now let me show you. Now let me write a bit of JSX so that you guys can see how we can work with JSX. So I'll just create a section, and inside this section I'll also provide a bit of ID to it. So I'll just give the name of like section, and inside this section I'll create my h1, which will say my website. Underneath this h1 I'll create my article, and inside this article I'll create h2, which will say like welcome to React.js. Now underneath this h2 I'll create a paragraph, and which will say like paragraph content or text. I'm going to also provide a class name to it, and by the way, instead of writing a class, you have to write a class name, and I'm going to tell you why, but you have to write a class name for now. And I'll just give the class name of text right here. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our result right here. So if I right click on there and go to my inspect element, we are first of all getting our root. And now inside this root, we have our section with the ID of section. We have our h1. We also have our article, and inside this article, we have this h2. And we also have this class. We are now providing a class name, and here you can see we are now getting a class. This is a JSX rule, which I'm going to explain in a few seconds. But yeah, here you can see this is how we can write HTML inside our JavaScript functions. So to combine all of that, this is how we can create our component. Now let me show you how our React.js convert all of this HTML to JavaScript. And to show you that, first of all, you have to go into this babel.js.io, and inside there you have to place your HTML content. So I'll just copy my HTML content from here, and now I'm going to just place it right here. And what are we getting? We are now getting JavaScript. So if I copy there, and instead of providing this section and article and stuff like that, I'm going to just remove there from here. I'll just provide my return statement, and now I'm going to place this content right here. I'm going to also remove this stuff. Let's just remove them. I'm going to also select this comment and hit Control D or Command D and Command D, and I'm going to just remove that from here. So if I save my file, now I'm going to zoom out a bit, and first of all I'm going to also copy this line of code, and I'm going to have to put that at the top. And you don't have to worry about this code. We are not going to be writing our code like this. You don't have to worry about this coding. So I'm going to save my file, and now if I go into my website and refresh there, once again we are getting this same result like my website, welcome to React, and paragraph content. So if I go into the section, we have our ID, we have our h1 article or h2, and also our paragraph with a class of text right here. So if you weren't using JSX, so we are going to have to create our component this way. Like, come on, look at this redundancy. We are now using some dash JSX and providing a section to it, then we are providing ID and children, and there are a lot of things going on. So instead of writing all of them, I'm going to totally remove them from here, and I'll just replace that with this return statement, and I'm going to also remove this first line. So this is what a JSX is, and this is the power of React.js and also JSX in React.js. Welcome to another challenge. So in this challenge, you're going to be practicing JSX. So first of all, I want you to create a file with the name of welcome message.jsx, and inside that file, then you have to create a component with the name of welcome message. Inside that component, you will have a div, and inside that div, you will have your h1 first of all, and inside that h1, you're going to be providing like hello world. Underneath this h1, you're going to be also creating a paragraph which will say like welcome to learning JSX, and finally you have to import in the app.jsx and render that to the DOM. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. I'm going to create a file with the name of welcome message.jsx, and inside there we are going to be using our RAFCE to create this component right here. And first of all, we have our div, and now inside this div we are going to be defining our h1, which will just say like hello world. And now underneath this h1, we're going to be creating our paragraph which will say like welcome to learning JSX. I'm going to save this file. Now let me go ahead and go to my app.jsx file and register my welcome component right in here. Okay, so I'll just close there like so, save my file, and here you can see we are now getting hello world and also welcome to learning JSX. So yeah, that was our second challenge. Whenever you're working with JSX, there are a few rules that you have to keep in mind. I'm going to show you their rules, but first of all, I'm going to remove this article from here. I'm going to save my file, and here you can see we are now getting my website, which is looking amazing. So the first rule that you have to keep in mind is that from one component, you are allowed to return only one parent. Like there can't be multiple parents. So what am I talking about? Let's suppose if I just move this line of code into new line, so what are we getting? We are now getting an error. It is saying that you are not allowed to create multiple parents. Like this is a parent and this is also a parent, or I can just write a div, and here you can see still it's going to give us that error right here. And why is that? Because as I said that our React.js compiler will compile our code to JavaScript, and that's not allowed in JavaScript. Anytime you're working with JSX, this is the first rule that you have to keep in mind, that from one component you are only allowed to return one div. And now inside this div you can do anything, like you can create any amount of nested stuff. So you can create your h1, you can write anything inside there. Even inside this h1 you can write a div and you can write anything inside there underneath there. But you have to keep in mind that from one component you have to return only one parent, and anything you write inside that parent will totally work. Okay, so that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. The next thing that you have to keep in mind is that in JSX you have to close all of your tags. In HTML, like that wasn't necessary. If you want to work with like images, so you would just create your image and you don't even have to close that if you don't want it to. But in JSX you have to close there, as you can see right here. So if I just remove there, it will give us that error right here, like JSX element image has no corresponding closing tag. Like you have to close there, and that doesn't matter if you're working with the image or if you're working with the divs. So I'm gonna just remove that from here, and here you can see it's gonna also give us that error right here. And we can also make it as a self-closing tag if you wanted to, but you have to keep in mind that anytime you're working with JSX, you have to close all of your HTML tags. Okay, so that's the second thing that you have to keep in mind. The third thing that you have to keep in mind is that anytime you are working with the classes, you are not allowed to provide a class by using the class keyword. Instead of a class, you have to provide a class name. So what am I talking about? I'm going to just write h1 and I'll just say like hello. And now if I just provide a class right here, I'll just write a class. And now here I'm going to just say like my class, and here you can see it's not going to give me any error. Now if I save my file, and now if I refresh there and go into my console, now it's going to give us this error like invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? Because our JavaScript compiler will now think that you're defining some sort of a class. As we learned in our OOP section, like object-oriented programming section in our JavaScript course, JavaScript will think like you are defining some kind of a class, and like the polymorphism, inheritance, and all of that concept that we learned. Okay, so JavaScript will think that you're defining that class, but we are not defining that class. We are just providing a class to our element. Okay, so to provide a class, we have to use our class name instead. So if I just remove that, and if I change there to the class name, and now if I save my file, and now if I refresh there, and here you can see that error is now gone. So yeah, that was the third thing that you have to keep in mind. And now the fourth thing that you have to keep in mind, anytime you are working with the forms, in some situation we also want to provide a label for our input field. Okay, so I'll just use like form, and I'm going to just remove this action because we don't need that. And now inside this form, we will just create our label. So if I just create my label, in some situation we would want to provide our for attribute to it. So if I just write like name, and I'll just use my name inside there, I'm going to create my input field which will say like text would be fine. I'll also provide a bit of placeholder to it. So enter your name. I'm going to save my file, and now if I just refresh there, and what are we getting? We are now getting like invalid DOM property 4. Did you mean the HTML4? Because now once again, our JavaScript compiler will think that you're creating some sort of a for loop. Okay, so we are not creating a for loop. We are now providing just a for property or the for attribute to our label. So instead of providing a for, we have to write our HTML4. Okay, so I'm going to save my file, and now if I refresh there, and here you can see that error is now gone. I can write anything I want. So yeah, that was a few rules about JSX that you have to keep in mind whenever you're working with the JSX. In this series, we learned a few rules about JSX, and we're going to be exploring more throughout this course, but now I'm going to just make you recall those rules. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a file with the name of jsxrules.jsx. Inside that file, create a component or a functional component with the name of JSX rules, and then inside that JSX rules component, you're going to be creating a div, and inside their div, first of all, you have to write h1 with the title of JSX rules, and now underneath there, you're going to be creating a three paragraph, and one paragraph will say like JSX must return a single parent element, another paragraph will say like JSX element must be properly closed, and the third one will say like JSX attribute are written using a camel case. Like instead of using a class, we're going to be using a class name. This is the most simplest challenge. Okay, so give it your best shot. If you can do it, then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. Now let me create my component with the name of jsxrules.jsx. I'll just create my functional component right here, and now inside this functional component, the first thing that we have is our div, and now inside this div we have our h1, and I'll write like JSX rules, and now underneath this h1 we are going to be creating a paragraph which will say like JSX must return a single parent element. Okay, that's going to be the first one. We're going to be also creating another paragraph which will say like JSX element must be properly closed, and come on, this should be a clause, and also we have a JSX attribute are written using a camel case like so. So I'm going to save my file. We have to remove them, and yeah, that's our simple exercise. Now we have to register this component inside our app, so I'll just register there right here. Okay, so we have our JSX rules, so I'm going to save my file, and here you can see we are now getting those rules right here. So we have our JSX rules. So yeah, that was another challenge in this course. Now let's talk about expression in JSX. So with JSX, you can write your expression inside the curly braces, and the expression can be a React variable or property or any other valid JavaScript expression. JSX will execute that expression and give you the result. Okay, so here you can see I have my app component, and now inside this app component I have a paragraph, and now inside this paragraph I'm now writing 2 plus 2 as it is without providing any curly braces, nothing to it. So it's going to give us the result of 2 plus 2 as it is. Why is that? Because our React.js will treat it as a text, but now if you wrap that inside the curly braces, it's going to give us the result of 4. And why is that? Now React.js will treat it as a valid JavaScript expression, so it will execute that expression and it's going to give us the result of that. And we are not just limited to write 2 plus 2. We can also create some sort of a variable, and we can put our values inside there. Then we can use that inside our UI. We can even also create a function. We can also embed that function inside our UI and also the classes as well. So now let me just show you all of that in action. Now let's discuss how we are going to be embedding dynamic content in our JSX. So first of all, I'm going to just create my paragraph. Inside this paragraph, I'll just say like 2 plus 2. And now here is a question for you. What do you think will be the result of this code? So if I save my file, I want you to give me the answer. And the result will be 2 plus 2. Why is that? Because we are not wrapping this code inside the curly brace. But now if I wrap that inside the curly brace, we now entered our JavaScript word. So if I save my file now, and here you can see now it's going to give us 4 right here. Why is that? Because now we are running this expression inside the JavaScript. So our React.js compiler will compile this code, and it will think like this is a JavaScript code, so it will execute this code. So if I just write like 2 plus 2 is equal to, outside from this curly braces, now it's going to give us like 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Okay, which is amazing. So that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. Next, I'll just create a variable with the name of like my name, and I'm going to store my name inside there like Hussein Web Dev. And now underneath this paragraph, I'm going to create my h1 right here. And now let's suppose if I want to dynamically render my variable name inside this h1, how can I go about doing that? Well, so if I just write like my name, if I save my file, I'm now getting my name right here, but I want to get this value like Hussein Web Dev. So how can I go about doing that? To do that, we have to wrap this variable name inside these curly braces, like the curly opening brace and the curly closing brace. So if I save my file, and now it's going to give us Hussein Web Dev right here. Okay, so this is how we are going to be rendering our variables dynamically inside our JSX. We are not limited to just render our expression and also our variable name. We can also provide arrays if you wanted to. So I'll just create like paragraph. I'll just say like my friends list, and now inside this list, I'm going to first of all open and close my JavaScript world, and now inside there we are going to be creating our array which will say like Alex. We also have John, and also Wahid, and something like that, and Jordan. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting like my friend list. We have Alex, John, Wahid, and also Jordan right here, which is amazing. Now I'm going to create a function, and I'm going to execute or embed this function dynamically inside my JSX. So I'll just use like multiply. It's going to take the parameter of A and also B, and it's going to return like A times B. Okay, And now underneath this paragraph, I'm going to create yet another paragraph which will say like 2 times 2 is equals to, and now we are going to be entering our JavaScript word. And now inside this JavaScript word, we are going to be executing our function which is a multiply. And for the perimeter, I'm going to pass 2 comma 2. So if I save my file, and what are we getting? We are now getting like 2 times 2 will gives us 4. So if I change that to like 2 times 10, save my file, it's going to give us like 2 times 10 will gives us 20, but here I'm writing like 2 times 2, and now it's going to give us 20. So if I just change that to like 2 times 10, and now the label is totally correct. Like this is going to be the label, and this is going to be the actual value which we are now getting from the JavaScript. I'm going to undo that. And the final thing that I want to show you about the embedding is that we can also embed a special class into our JSX. So I'll just create a special, and I'll just write like simple class or something like that. Now I'm going to create a paragraph. I'm going to provide like this is a special class or something like that. And inside this paragraph, what I want to do is that I want to create my class name, and I'm going to just remove these quotes from here, and I'm going to provide my curly brace. And now inside these curly braces, I'm going to copy this simple class name, and I'm going to just place it right here. So if I save my file, and now watch what happens. So if I select this class right here, so what are we getting? We are now getting our simple class, and now this simple class is coming dynamically from our JavaScript word right here. So I can totally change that to like anything I want. So if I save that, and here you can see it's going to give us like anything I want. So yeah, this is how we are going to be creating our stuff by using a JavaScript, and this is how we are going to be embedding that to our JSX by using these curly braces. In this challenge, you are going to be practicing the dynamic content in React.js. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a file with the name of greetings.jsx, and inside there you have to create your functional component with the name of greetings. So inside that component, you are going to be returning a div that is containing the h1, and that h1 element will dynamically display the greeting message. Like basically you have to create a variable with the name of like hello world or hello or gracias or something like that, and you have to render that greetings dynamically inside this h1. Next, create a paragraph element that dynamically display the current date. So if you can do this one okay, I'm gonna show you the solution, but yeah, at least give it a shot. If you can do it, like doesn't really matter. Okay, and yeah, here are more instruction if you care about that. And next you have to create a component with the name of product info, and inside that product info component you're going to be returning a div, and inside their div use the product object, in this case not just a product but the product object that contains the following properties, like name will be set to laptop, price will be set to like 1200, availability will be set to in stock. So once you do that, then render your component to the app.jsx, and that's going to be it. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. So I'll just create my greet.jsx component. I'm going to be using my RAFCE, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to greet. So I'll use like greet, which will say hello, and underneath it, or you know what, let me just show that right here. I'm going to be using h1, and I will just render my greet right here. So I'm going to save my file. Let me go ahead and go to my app and register my greet right here, and now I'm going to save my file. And here you can see we're now getting our hello right here, which is looking amazing. We also have to render the date, so I'll just use like date, and now let's just use our new date, and now render there right here. So I'm going to just provide like date as a label, and here we are going to be rendering our date, and now we have to access the get date method on there. So now if I save my file, now it's going to give us like the date is 19. So that was the first portion of this exercise. Now let's just create another component with the name of product info.jsx. JSX, there we go. We're going to be also creating our functional component, and this functional component will have our product. So I'll just write like product, and there's going to be an object. So we're going to be providing the name as a property, and that's going to be set to a laptop. We're going to be also providing the price, and price will be set to like 1200, and also the availability will be set to in stock. Availability in stock. Okay, so now we have to save our file. Now that we have to render the name, price, and availability totally dynamically. So how can we go about doing that? I'm going to remove this name, and now here inside there we're going to be using our h1. Let me just provide a label of name, and now we are going to be using a product.name right here. Now if I save my file, first of all we have to register this component. So I'm going to be using like product info, and hit enter, save my file. It's going to give us a laptop. Now I'm going to go in there, And the next thing that we have to do is that we also have to render the price and also the availability. So I'm going to basically duplicate that 2 times and change the label. So I'll just change that to price and also provide a dollar symbol there. And we also have to change the name to the price. Okay, and also we have to remove this name and change that to availability. So I'll just place this availability right here because I can't spell that. Okay, so I'll just write like availability here, save my file, and now we are getting the name of the laptop, also the price, and also the availability, which is now set to in stock. So now if I change like any of these values, so instead of 1200, I'm going to change that to like 1500. Now it's going to totally render there dynamically, and we can also change that to like computer instead, and now it's going to give us a computer. Okay, so yeah, that was our challenge about the dynamic content. Now let's talk about list in React.js. So in React.js, you will render your list with some type of loop. The JavaScript map array method is generally the preferred method to use for the list. So here you can see we have our component right here, and now inside this component we have our numbers array. And now if you wanted to iterate over through each number inside this array and render there to the DOM, so we are going to be using first of all the curly braces, and now inside these curly braces we're going to be getting our numbers list, and then we can use our map method on there. And now inside this map method is going to take a callback function, and we're going to be passing a number and also the index, and now inside there we're going to be using the UL and LI to render our numbers to the DOM. So this is how we are going to be doing all of this. So now let me show you that in action. Now let's talk about how we can work with list. So first of all, we have to create a list, then we are going to be working with that. I'll create a numbers list, and inside these numbers I will put like 1 2 3 4 5, and now we have to iterate over through each item inside that list and do something with that. So in my case, I'm gonna just iterate over through each item inside this list, and I'm gonna render that to the DOM. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be using like some sort of a main or section or anything like that so that we can work with that. So then we are going to be entering into our JavaScript world so that we can use our JavaScript array method like push, pop, reduce, filter, map, and all of that methods. In this case, I'm going to copy the name of this numbers array, and now if I just use dot, so here you can see we have all of our JavaScript array method, like we have add, concat, copy within, entries, every field, filter, find index, flat map, and we have a lot of them. But in this case, I'm only interested in the map method, and now here we are going to be passing our callback function to it. So I'll just use like number would be fine. And now for this callback function, here you can see, I want you to notice that now in this case we are providing a parenthesis, we are not providing a curly braces. So I want you to keep that in mind. So now we are providing these parentheses, and now if I hit enter right here, I'm gonna just write my UL, and now inside this UL I'm gonna write my LI right here. So now inside this LI, a lot of people will think that we are going to be just copying this number, and we have to just place it right here and save our file, and that's gonna be it. Let me just say that once again, we are now iterating over through each element inside this array. We are now rendering that to our browser. But now watch what happens. Here you can see we are now getting a number and we are not getting our numbers right here. So to get these numbers, we have to once again enter our JavaScript world. So I'm gonna have to remove that, or you know what, we have to just wrap that with these curly braces right here. So if I just wrap that with these curly braces, save my file, and now we are getting 1 2 3 4 and 5. But there is still a problem. Now you might be asking like, what's the problem? If I go into the console, what are we getting? We are now getting an error. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. And why are we getting this error? We are now getting this error because later in this course we are going to be learning about something called the stat, and stat will allows us to mutate or change these values. Like let's suppose if I want to remove something from this array, or if I want to add a new element to this array, so how can I go about doing that? So to do that, for that we are going to be using a stat. We are not there yet, so we are not going to be discussing a stat right now, but you have to keep in mind that anytime you want to change something inside this array, we have to first of all provide a label for that place. Okay, so like let's suppose if I want to either remove or update or something inside this array, I'm gonna have to first of all provide some sort of a unique label to it. I'll just write like 10 for this first one, and then 20 for the second one, and 30 for the next one, and so on and so forth. So this is how we are going to be providing a unique label. So anytime we remove something from this list, our React.js will know from where we remove that specific thing. So to do that, we are not going to be providing our unique things right here for each element inside our array, but instead we are going to be providing that for the parent. So we are going to be using a key right here, and that key will always be unique. Like you have to provide a unique thing for each element inside this array. Okay, so if you provide like one for this one and also one for this one, it's going to give you an error. Like it's going to still say each child should be unique. Okay, so now I'm going to copy that and now I'm going to place it right here. And now if I save my file, now if I just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting 1 2 3 4 5, and we are not getting that error. So this is how we are going to be iterating over through each element inside our list, and this is how we are going to be providing a unique key or a unique identifier for each element inside this list, and this is how we are going to be rendering there to the DOM. Now I'm going to just remove all of that stuff from here, and I'm going to also remove this number from here, and I'm going to replace that with this huge array. And here you can see we have our users info array, and now inside this array we have a few objects. So we have object 1 2 and a lot of them, and inside this object we have a username, we have the email, and also the location. So we have username of Hussein, then we have some sort of a test email, and we also have a location, and then we have the same thing for each object inside this array. So now I want to iterate over through each element inside this array, and I want to render the username, email, and location for each user inside this user info. So how can I go about doing that? Well, to do that, we are going to be once again using our map method. So first of all, we have to go inside to the JavaScript world, and then we have to use our user info. And what is a user's info? User's info is that array, and now we are going to be iterating over through that array. Okay, so I'll just use like dot map method, and here I'll just provide a user as a perimeter, and now inside there we're going to be using our UL, and as I said that we have to provide a unique value trade. So in this case I'll just provide like math.random, and now it's going to give us like a random number each time we render our content to the browser. Okay, so now inside there I'll just use my li. We have to go inside to the JavaScript world once again, and we can use our user and then dot, and here you can see we have our username, location, and also the email. So if I just select my username, save my file, and if this is the first time you're working with React.js, this may look a bit crazy to you, but trust me, if you did a bit of practice, you will get there. So I'm going to save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our usernames right here for each person. Now I'm going to duplicate this line of code, and instead of providing this username, I'm going to hit Control and space, and now we can select the location. I'm going to duplicate there once again, and now I'm going to hit Control and W once again, and now I'm going to select my email. Okay, so I'm going to save my file. Now let me go back, and this is how our entire code looks like. And first of all, we have our array. Inside this array we have our objects, and inside these objects we have our username, email, and also the location. And now we are iterating over through each item inside this array, and we are now only rendering the username, location, and also the email. And here you can see we are now getting the username, location, and also the email. So we can also change that to the username, email, and then location. And now it's going to give us the same result right here, which is amazing. But there is an optional thing that I want to do. If you don't care about that, you don't have to worry about that. If you don't know what a JavaScript destructuring is, you can go ahead and watch my JavaScript video about that. I have a complete course on JavaScript, so if you take that course, you would be fine. So now I'm going to destructure this value. If you can destructure that, you don't have to worry about that. Now I'm going to remove these users from here, and I'm going to provide my curly brace right here, and I'm going to destructure the username, also the email, and I'm going to also destructure the location as well. And now I no longer have to use these users again and again. I'm going to select that, hit Control D, and I'm going to remove that from here. Okay, so now if I save my file, and now if I refresh there, still we are getting that same result right here. But now we no longer have to provide that user dot again and again for all of these properties. So yeah, this is how we are going to be destructuring the properties from this array. Welcome to another challenge. So in this one, you will practice how you can render a list of data. So the first thing that I want you to do is that create a user list.jsx file, and inside there create a user list component. Create a users array with the following object, like this object right here. Each user will have the ID, name, and also the age. Then use a map method to render each user to the DOM. Okay, so that's going to be the first portion of this challenge. In the next portion, you're going to be creating a product list file, and inside that file you're going to be creating a product list component, and inside that component you're going to be creating a products array, and inside this array you will have like these objects which will represent different objects. So we have ID for the object, the name, price, and yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. And now finally you have registered that inside the app component. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm gonna give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna create my user list.jsx component. Inside them, I'm going to be using my array. So the first thing that we want to do is that we want to create our users array. So I'll just use like const users, and that's going to be set to this array. And now inside this array, we're going to be creating different objects. For each object or for each user, we're going to be providing the ID, and also we're going to be providing the name. In this one, that's going to be set to ls, and I'm going to also provide the age of 25 to there. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate that a few times, and I'm going to change the ID to 1 to 2 and also to 3. I'm going to also change the name to Bob and this one to Charlie. Change the age to 30 and also the age to 22. So that's going to be my users array, and now inside this array we have a few users right here. Now I want to iterate over through their users, and I want to render them to the DOM. So how can I go about doing this? So I'll just remove this users list, and inside there we are going to be using our curly braces. So we are now entering the JavaScript word. So now we are going to be using the users, which is our array. So now inside there we can use our map method. So I'll just provide a user, and now here for each user we are going to be rendering the div. First of all, let's just write a div, and I'm going to also close this div right here, save my file. And for this div we are going to be also providing the key, and the key which we are going to be setting will be user.id, and this ID is coming from each of the users right here. So we have a ID 1, 2 and also the 3. So that's done. Now inside this div we are going to be also creating our h1, which will say name. Okay, so for the name we are going to be using like user.name. I'm going to also duplicate that and change that to age. Okay, and also change this label to age as well. So now I'm going to save my file. Let's just go ahead and go to our app and register our users list right here. So I'll use like users list, save my file, and here you can see we are now getting each of the user right here. So we have Alice, Bob and also Charlie. So that was the first thing. Now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our product list.jsx component. Inside there we are going to be using our array, and inside there let's just define our products here, and that's going to be set to array. In this array we'll have a few objects, and each object will have the ID, the name. So I'll just write like iPhone, or maybe phone would be fine. And I'm going to also provide the price of, I don't know, just a random arbitrary price like, I don't know, 699 or something like that. I'm going to duplicate that a few times and change that to 2, and also change this one to 3. And I'm going to also change the name of that to like laptop. Instead of providing a phone, I'm going to change that to headphones. And let's just also change the price to like 1200, and also change the price to 199. I'm going to save my file, and this is how we're going to be defining our list of objects. Okay, so now we have to iterate over through there. So if you want to iterate over through there, we're going to be using products.map method, and it's going to allow us to iterate over through each element. Okay, so now inside there we're going to be using our div. Let's just close there like so. Save my file. We are going to be also passing our key to there, and key will be coming from each of the products. So we're going to be providing like product.id, which is coming from this product, and each will have different IDs. So that's why we are now providing there, because that's going to be a unique one. So that's why we are now providing there. So now I'm going to just use like h1 for the name, and I'm going to provide like paragraph.name, and I'm going to also change that to price and change the label to price as well. So let's just provide a dollar symbol. I'm going to save my file, and now let me go ahead and go to my app component and register my product list right here. Save my file, and I'm going to comment this line out, and here you can see we're now getting different product, like we have a phone, laptop, and also the headphones. Oh, we are providing a dollar symbol twice. I'm going to have to remove that in one area, so I'll just remove that from here because we are already providing that as a string. So I'm going to save my file now, and now that's looking better. So yeah, that was our map method practice or challenge. Now let's talk about the props. So props or properties are argument passed into React components, and props allows us to pass data from the parent component to a child component. Props are passed to a component via the HTML attribute. So here you can see I have my app component, and now inside this app component I'm going to be calling my user component. And now let's suppose if I want to pass some sort of an image path from the app component, which is a parent component, to the user component, which is a child component. So I'll just write an image, or you can also write an img. You can give it any name that you like, and then you have to write an equal to sign, and then you have to specify the path. Okay, so we can also specify the name, we can also provide the image as a number, we can also provide the is married flag as a boolean, and we can also provide hobbies as an array. So this is how we are going to be passing our data from the parent component to the child component, and now to receive that data from the parent component inside the child component. So this is how we are going to be doing there. First of all, we are going to be taking a props as a perimeter inside our component, and then we can use their prop, and then we can use the dot notation to access all of their data. So I can use like prop dot image, so it's going to give us the image, and now I can use prop dot name, prop dot age, and also prop dot is married, and also prop dot hobbies. Okay, so it's going to give us all of their data from the parent component to the child component. So now let me show you all of them in action. Now let's talk about the props, like how we are going to be passing our data from the parent component to the child component. First of all, we are going to have to create our child component, and then inside that child component we are going to be getting our prop. Okay, so I'll just create my user component, and inside this user component I'll just return my section right here. So if I save there, now we have to call or register this component inside this parent component. So I'll just use my user component right here, and now we are going to be passing our data from this parent component to this child component. So how can you go about doing that? To do that, we are going to be using a props, and if you are coming from the HTML background, you already use props, but you didn't even know you are using it. You've already used this image tag, and now here you can see these are the prompts for this image tag. Like, we are now providing a source, and we are also providing the alternative text for this image props. So you already use these prompts, but you didn't know that you were using a prop. Okay, so now if you want to pass some sort of a data from this parent component to this child component, so we are going to be using a prop. Now we can provide any kind of data that we like. So I'll just provide like name, and now I'll just write like Hussein web dev. And by the way, this prop can be anything, and this value can be also anything. Like, you can provide banana right here, and you can provide like orange if you wanted to. That will work exactly the same. So I'm going to just undo that to name, and now I'm just passing name from the parent component to this child component. So now if I want to access that name inside this child component, so I'm gonna have to use my props right here. So I'll just use like props, and now I'm gonna log these props to the console. So I'll just use my props right here, save my file, and now watch what happens. So if I just refresh there, what am I getting? I'm getting a name with the value of Hussein web dev. And where is that coming from? That is coming from this user prop right here. So once again, if I change that to like banana, and now if I save there, I'm now getting that banana right here. So if I just refresh there, I'm now getting that banana. So yeah, this is how you're going to be passing your data from your parent component to the child component, and this is how you're going to be accessing that. So now we have to use that. I'm going to just remove that from here, and now inside this section I'll just use my h1. I'm going to provide the label of name, and here we have to render that inside our JavaScript. So we are going to be using like props dot name right here, because this is the name of our prop. If I save there, and I'm now getting the result right here. Now I'm not only limited to provide the strings, I can also provide like anything I want. So I'll just use like age, and age will be set to 18, not 18, 22. And I'm gonna also provide the boolean value like is married, and that's gonna be set to false. We cannot see that not right now because we are now rendering there to the UI, so we will not see the result of that. But later, very soon, we're going to be also discussing about the boolean values for the props as well. You will see that very soon, don't worry about it. We can also provide the list if you wanted to. So I'll just use like coding. I'm gonna also provide like reading, and also the sleeping. So if I save that, so it's gonna format it this way. So I'll just remove that from here, and now we have to access that right here. So I'm gonna just provide like this is my name and age, and I'm gonna render my props.age right here. I'm gonna also render my is married boolean flag. So I'll just use like is married, and here I'm gonna pass my props.is married, and now underneath then we are going to be providing our h4 of hobbies, and here we have to just render our hobbies right here. Come on, if I can type it today, like props.hobbies. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our name, age, and also is married, but we cannot see the value of that. As I said that we will very soon, but this is just a boolean value, and we cannot see that not right now. And we also have our hobbies, and hobbies are coding, reading, and sleeping. In some situation, we would also want to provide our images. So I'll just provide yet another prop for the image. And here I'm going to just pass my own image. which is coming from my GitHub repository. If you have your own image, you can totally provide there. And now we also have to render there right here. So I'm going to be using my image tag. Instead of providing this quotes, I'm going to remove that from here, and I'm going to just render there dynamically. So I'll just use like props.image or img, and I'm going to also provide some text for this alternative text. So I'll just use like props dot, I guess name would be fine. So if I save there, and I'm now getting this amazing guy, but this is super huge. So I'll just have to provide a width of 200 would be fine. Save my file, and here you can see I'm now getting this card right here. So I'm now getting my image, the name, age, and everything right here. So this is how we are going to be passing our data from this parent component to this child component, and this is how we are going to be accessing their data by using the props, and this is how we are going to be rendering their data by using the props. Now there is one thing that I want to do, which is called the prop destructuring. But if you don't know what a destructuring is, you can either go to my JavaScript course and watch what a destructuring is, or you can just read about that. You can ask from ChatGPT if you wanted to, but you have to learn about the prop destructuring. So because I'm going to be using a prop destructuring right now, so I'll just remove these props right here, and I'm going to just destructure my name, age, and also is married flag, and also the hobbies. So now I no longer have to use these props again and again. So I'm going to select one, hit Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D, and remove that. And now if I save my file, and here you can see everything is still working the way we expect them to work. Okay, so now we are destructuring all of that properties, and now we are using that inside our component. So yeah, that was it about the props, and that was it about the props destructuring. Time for the props exercise. So in this exercise, you are going to be creating a products.jsx file, and inside there you're going to be defining the functional component with the name of person, and it will take two props. So it's going to take the person name, and it's going to also take the person age. Okay, so now inside that person component, you're going to be using the h2, which will display the person name, and then you're going to be using a paragraph which will display the person age. So that's going to be the first portion of this exercise. Now in the second portion, you're going to be creating a product.jsx file, and inside there once again you're going to be defining the functional component with the name of product, and now inside there it's going to also take two props. So you're going to be providing the product name and also the product price. So you're going to be using h2 to display the product name, you're going to be using a paragraph to display the product price, and finally you have to just import that to your app component, and that's going to be it. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. So I'll just create like person.jsx component, and I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there. And let me just go ahead and go to my app, register my component here. So I'll just use like person, import there, and close there. Now I want to provide a prompt to this person. So how can I go about doing that? I'm going to provide the name, and name you can provide like basically any name that you prefer, but in my case I'm going to specify my own name, and also I'm going to provide my age, which will be set to 22. So now that we successfully provided these prop right here, so the next thing that we have to do is that we have to go ahead and go to this person, and we have to use those props. So to use that, we're going to be using a props, and here first of all we have to use our h2, not h1 but h2, and we're going to be using a props.name because we are now only interested in this name right here. So that's how we are going to be rendering that name. Next, we also have to create a paragraph which will render the prop.age. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting the name and also the age right here. So that was the first portion of this challenge. So the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our product.jsx component. I'm going to be using the RAFCE, and once again we have to go to our app and register our product component right here. It's going to also take two props, so we're going to be providing the name, and name will be set to iPhone, and I'm going to provide the price of like a lot of price. I don't know, maybe I guess that's going to be fine. So now let's just save this file and go into our product, and we are going to be getting that props by using this props object, and we have to use our h2 to render the prompts dot what I forgot the name and also the price. So I'll just render the name, and also we have to use our paragraph, and which will say prompts dot price. Okay, so now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting Hussein and also 22 as the age, and we're also getting the name of iPhone and the amount of price. So that's cool and everything, but the next thing that we have to do is that we have to destructure the name and the age, and we have to use that inside this component. So to do that, I'm going to remove these props, like yeah, I'm going to just remove them, and I'm going to provide the name and also the age. we no longer have to use this props dot again and again. So I'm going to select there and hit Control D. So it's going to select there twice and remove there. Now if I save my file, and once again, here you can see the result is exactly the same. And next we have to go into the product and remove this props from there, and we're going to be providing or destructuring the name and also the price. Okay, so now I'm going to select this props once again and hit Control D and remove there, save my file, and now we are getting exactly the same thing. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a props. This is how we are going to be destructuring there. And this is how we are going to be using them inside our components. Now in some situation we would want to pass our data from our parent component to our child component by closing there. So what do I mean by that? Let me just zoom in a bit. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a components folder, and I will provide my card.tsx, not tsx but jsx inside there. Now let me use my RAFC, save my file, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to call my card component right here, but I'm not going to call my component like so. I'm going to close them manually like that. And now inside there, what I want to do, I want to write my h1, which will say like my card, and I will also provide a paragraph which will say like this is some content for card 1. Okay, so now let me just save my file, and now let me go back. So here you can see we are now passing this data to our card component by closing there. But now the question is, how in the world we are going to be accessing that data? So to access their data, there is something called the children, which allows us to access their data from the parent component to the child component. So I'll use like props, and here I'll just use like props.children. So if I use that, now let me use my npm run dev. So it's gonna start my server. Let me just write a localhost right here. And what are we getting? We're now getting like my card and also that same paragraph text right here. Okay, so we can also destructure them by just removing these props and destructure our children. So now we no longer have to specify this props dot, and now we have to save our file, and here you can see we are still getting there. And yeah, I'm gonna just duplicate that like a few times. So that was for the one, and I'm gonna just duplicate that like 2 times. So this is going to be like card 2 and then card 3. And yeah, we are now getting all of their data from our parent component, which is this app component, and we are now passing that to the card component, and this is how we are going to be accessing them by using the children. Now let's talk about the conditional rendering. So conditional rendering allows us to dynamically display different UI component or content based on a specific condition. This enables us to create more interactive and responsive user experiences. So there are a few ways to conditionally render our UI. The first way is to just use the if and else statement, and also we have another ways like using the ternary and also the AND operator. So now let's talk about the first one, which is the if and else statement. So here you can see we have two components, like we have the valid password component and we also have the invalid password component. Now we are going to be creating yet another password component, and then we are going to be calling there inside our app component. And now inside this app component, we are going to be passing the isValid prop to it, and that's going to be set to true. Now we will receive that prop inside the password component, and then we are going to be providing our check. So if our isValid prop is true, we are going to be rendering the valid password component. So if that's not the case, we are going to be returning the invalid password component. So we can use that by using the if and else statement, and we can also refactor this code to use the JavaScript ternary. So to use that, here you can see I'm going to comment all of that code out, and now I'm going to be using my ternary operator. So if isValid prop is equal to true, we are going to be rendering our valid password component. But if that's not the case, we are going to be returning the invalid prop component. Here is another example. I have a cart component, and now inside this cart component, I have my groceries. And now here I'm going to be checking if groceries.length is greater than 0, and then we are going to be displaying this UI. But if that is not the case, like if we don't have any content inside the groceries list, then it's not going to show us anything. So without wasting any time, now let's get into the coding. Now let's talk about how we are going to be rendering our UI based on some sort of condition. So to do that, I'm going to create 3 components. So the first component I'm going to create will be a valid password component, which will only return like h1 valid password. I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to change that to invalid password, and also the component name to invalid password as well. Okay, so that's going to be my first 2 component. Now I'm going to also create a component for the password itself, and here inside there we're not going to be returning anything. I'm going to call this component my password component right here inside my app component, and I'm going to also give it the prop of isValid, and that's going to be set to true. Now inside my password component, I'm going to also destructure that prop, which is the isValid prop. Now inside this password component, I'm going to be checking if is valid. So in that situation, we are going to be returning the valid password component. And if that's not the case, so we are going to be returning the invalid password component right here. So now let me just say that once again. First of all, we are creating two components like the valid password and also the invalid password. And we are also creating a password component which is taking the prop of is valid. Now that is set to true. And based on that prop, we are now checking if that is set to true, render this component. If that is not set to true, then render this component. So now in this case, the is valid is set to true. So it's going to give us the result of valid password component, which is the valid password. And here you can see we are now getting the valid password component. Why is that? Because is valid is now set to true. So it's going to give us the valid password component right here. But now if I make that as false, so now let me just change that to false. And now we are getting an invalid password component right here. Because our is valid prop is set to false, so it's not going to render this UI. Instead, it's going to render this UI right here. So that was the first way we can render our components based on some sort of a condition. Now we can totally refactor this code to use a ternary operator. So I'm going to comment this line out, and you know what, I'm going to also comment that line out, and I'll just return like is valid. And if that's the case, we're going to be returning the valid, valid password component. And if that's not the case, we're going to be returning the invalid password component right here. So if I save that, that's going to work exactly the same. So if I change that to true, and it's going to give us that valid password component. Now I can also refactor that a bit more if I wanted to. So I can totally remove this coding. I can also remove this return statement. And I'm going to also remove these curly braces from here, save my file. And this is how we are going to be conditionally rendering our UI. Now let me give you one more example by using the AND operator. So I'm going to just remove all of that coding from here. And now I'm going to create a separate component with the name of card. So I'll just give it the name of card, and I'm going to remove that from here. And this is how we are going to be creating our component. And I'm going to also call this component right here inside my app. So I'll just remove that and render my card component right here. So if I save that, and we are now getting our card right here, which is looking amazing. Now inside this card component, I'm going to provide my items right here. So const items, and we will have a few items right here inside this component. And now let me just place this item right here. So we have a few items inside this list. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this card from here, and I'm going to just write my h1 card, and I'm going to also paste my card emoji right in here. Now underneath that, I'm going to conditionally render my UI. So I'll just check like items dot length. So if the items dot length is greater than 0, and we are going to be rendering over h2. So I'll just use my h2 right here, and I'm going to say like you have items dot length. We're going to be checking the length of our items and then items in your cart. So if I save my file, and here you can see it's going to give us like you have 4 items inside your cart. So if I just remove like one of them, I'm going to just remove that, save my file. Now it's going to give us like you have 3 items inside your cart. And now if I completely remove every single thing from this cart, so now this condition is false, like items.length is no longer greater than 0, it is equal to 0. So we're not going to be getting this result right here. So if I save that, and it's going to only give us the card which is coming from this h1, but it's not going to give us this result as you can see right here. So if I just undo that, and let me just get that back, save my file, and now we are getting like you have 4 items inside your card. Now underneath that, I'm going to just render my items right here. So I'll just use like ul, and now inside this ul I'm going to provide my h4, and let's just provide like products or something like that. Now underneath this h4, I'm going to go into my JavaScript once again, and I'm going to be using items.map method, and here we are going to be passing our specific item. And now inside there we are going to be passing our li, and which will just say like item right here, and we are going to be also passing a key to this. So for the key I'll just use like key met.random. And now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our item right here, like we have a wireless earbuds, power bank, new SSD, hoodie, and stuff like that. But if I remove every single thing from here, save my file, we are only getting these products, we are not getting our item. That's because we are not rendering anything right here, because our cart is totally empty, and we are also not getting anything. That's because this condition is false. So if this condition is false, we're not going to be getting this UI. Time to tackle the conditional rendering challenge. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a weather.jsx file, and inside that file you're going to be creating a functional component with the name of weather, and it will take the prop of temperature and then I want you to use the if, else if, and else statement to conditionally render different messages based on the temperature value, which we are going to be specifying in a few seconds. So if the temperature is below 15, display it's cold outside. And if the temperature is between 15 and 25, then display it's nice outside. And if the temperature is above 25, then display like it's hot outside. So that's going to be the first portion of this challenge. Now in the second challenge that we have to do is that we have to create a user status component, and inside that component it will also take two boolean prop. The first one will be logged in, and the second one will be is admin. So use the and operator to display the message for admin and also for the normal user as well. So if the log in and also the is admin, both of these props are true, which means like the person is admin, so then I want you to display like welcome admin. So if that's not the case, and if only the login is true, then display like welcome user. So that's going to be the second portion. Now for the final one, you have to create a greetings.jsx file. Inside that file, you're going to be creating a functional component with the name of greetings, and it will also take what do we call it, the prop of time of the day. You can provide like morning or afternoon or evening or something like that. Then I want you to use the ternary operator. So if the time of the day is equal to morning, then display good morning. So if the time of the day is equal to afternoon, then display good afternoon. And finally, you have to just import all of that component inside the app.jsx and check out the result of there. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now I'm going to give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my weather.jsx component, and we're going to be using our RAFC inside there. We can define like let temp, and temp will be equals to 26 for the first one. Okay, and now here the first thing that we have to do, or you know what, we don't even have to provide all of that. Let's just remove that from here. We're going to be using our if, else if, and else statement. So let's just provide for the condition like temp. So if the temperature is less than 15, so in that situation we're going to be rendering what do we call it, it's cold outside. Okay, and if that's not the case, so what do we have to do? We have to check for the temperature. If temperature is greater than or equal to 15 and temperature, come on, temperature is less than or equal to 25, so in that situation we're going to be rendering this h1 one more time, and it will say like it's nice outside. Okay, and finally if that is not equal to anything, so we are going to be just returning, or you know what, we also have to specify the else if one more time. And for this condition we're going to be providing like if temperature is greater than 25, so in that situation we are going to be returning our h1 one more time, and we will say like it's hot outside. Okay, so now I'm gonna save my file, and then we have to register this component inside our app.tsx file. So I'll just use like weather tsx or jsx to be precise. So I'm gonna save my file and check this out. So it's gonna give us like it's hot outside. But now if I change that to like, I don't know, maybe 15, and now if I save my file, so here you can see it's going to give us like it's nice outside. And now if I change that to like, I don't know, maybe 3 would be fine. So if I change that to 3, so it's going to give us like it's cold outside. So that was the first portion of this challenge. And now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create our user status.jsx component. So I'm going to be using my RAFCE inside there, and also I'm going to go into my app, and let's just comment this line out, and I'm going to render my user status component, and it's going to take two props. So it's going to take like logged in, and I'm going to set that to true, and then is admin, and I'm going to also set that to false. I'm going to save my file, and now let me go ahead and use those props inside this component. So we are going to be just taking the props, and let's just provide our check. So I'm going to remove that from here, and we're going to be checking there if prop dot logged in, LOGGED logged in, and props dot is admin. So in that situation we're going to be returning like h1, which will say like welcome admin, because if the user already logged in, and if the user is also an admin, so we're going to be showing like welcome admin. So if that's not the case, so we're going to be only showing like h1, which will say like welcome normal or welcome user. Okay, so I'm gonna save this file right now, and we already registered there right here. So here you can see it's gonna give us like welcome user. And why is that? Because logged in is set to true, but is admin is set to false. So that's why we are now getting like welcome user. But if I change that instead of a false, I'm going to change that to true and save my file. Now it's going to give us welcome admin right here. So that was the second portion of our challenge. And now for the third and final one, we are going to be creating our greeting.jsx component. Let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, and register there right here inside my app. So I'll just use like greetings and close them. It's gonna also take the prop of time of day, and I'm gonna set that to morning. Okay, and let's just go ahead and go to our component. Inside this component, we're going to be receiving our props once again, and instead of providing this return statement, we're going to be using our ternary operator. So I'm going to be using like if props dot time of day is triple equals to morning. So in that situation, we are going to be rendering our h1. Let's just write our h1. God damn, what the hell am I doing? And which will say like good morning. And if that's not the case, come on. If that's not the case, so we are going to be rendering h1 one more time, and which will say like good afternoon. And I'm gonna save my file, and we also have to return there. So let's just check this out. Here you can see it's gonna give us good morning. That's because we are now providing the time of the day is morning. But if I change that to like afternoon, come on, afternoon, and save my file, so it's going to give us like good afternoon. So let me go there, and we can also destructure our prompts. So we can just destructure like time of day, copy there, and we no longer have to provide our prop dot. So let's just save there, and it's going to still gives us that same result right here. So yeah, that was our challenge about god damn it, that was our challenge about the conditional rendering in React.js. There are a lot of ways to style our component, but in this specific section we are going to be only learning about the basics. But later in this course we are going to be also learning about the popular libraries like Redux and Daisy UI, Tailwind CSS, Shades and UI and stuff like that. But for now we are going to be only learning about the basics of styling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create my section, and inside this section I'm going to just write my h1 inline style. And now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our inline style right here, which is looking amazing. So if I want to change the color of that, or if I want to provide some sort of a styling for that, so I can just use a style attribute and equal to, and then double curly brace, not a single but double curly braces. You have to keep that in mind. First of all, you're going to be opening your curly braces, you're going to be opening double curly braces, and then you're going to be closing double curly braces. And now inside there you can write like all of your CSS styling right here, which you've already learned in my HTML and CSS courses. So I'll just write like color, and I'm going to just write like black, not black but red. So if I save there, and here you can see we are now getting our red color right here, which is looking amazing. And now I'm going to also provide a background color to it, but there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. In CSS we write our background color like this. First of all, we write a background and then dash and then color. But this is not a CSS. You are not currently working with the CSS. You are working with the React.js. So you have to keep in mind that you are going to be writing your CSS in one line like a background color. But this is not accurate. Here you can see we are also getting this suggestion like background color as a camel case. So if I click on them, anytime we have some sort of a property which have two names like background and also the color, so we are not going to be providing spaces, we are not going to be providing a dashes, and we are also not allowed to write that in lowercase or in totally uppercase. We have to write that as a one word, and also we have to write that as a camel case, just like this. And now I'm going to just provide a value for that, so I'll just use like teal, and I'm going to also provide a bit of padding to it. So padding will be 2 rem or something like that. And yeah, I'm gonna save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our styling right here. I'm gonna just change the color of that to like white, and now that's looking better. So this is how we are going to be providing our styling inline. So first of all, you have to provide a style attribute, and then double curly braces opening and double curly braces closing, and you also have to keep this rule in mind. So that was the first way. Now we can also extract all of that styling from here, and we can put then some sort of an object, and then we can reference that object inside the style. So I'm gonna go to the top, and here I'll just create my variable with the name of like styles, and now I'm gonna just place my styling right here. But first of all, we have to wrap that inside these curly braces like as an object, and then we have to place our styling there. I'm gonna save my file, and now I'm gonna copy the variable name from there, and we have to just place it right here. But in this case, we are not going to be writing double curly braces. We are going to be only working with the single curly braces. So there's our JavaScript word right here. Now inside this JavaScript word, we are now rendering or styling totally dynamically. So if I save my file, and here you can see if I just refresh there, that's gonna still work exactly the same. So I can just change the color of that to like crimson or something like that, and here you can see it's gonna still work right here. So that was the second way to style our component. Now let me show you one more way. So I'm gonna just remove all of that content from here and also this h1. So if I save my file, and now I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna remove this component folder from here, and I'm gonna create my file, which will be index.css file. Okay, and now inside this index.css file, we're going to be placing all of our css, like body will be set to this color, and also we are providing a display flex and all of that kind of stuff, which you've already learned in my css course. So here you can see we are now providing all of our styling. Now I'm going to go into my app.jsx component, and inside there, now if I want to use all of that styling, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import that in this component. So I'm going to be just using like import, and then we have to write a string, and then we have to go one level up above. We have to just write index.css. So if I save my file, and now if I hold control and click on there, it's going to bring us to this index.css file right here. So now inside this section, I'll just use my h1 and I'll just write like separate file for styling or something like that. So if I save there, and now we are getting this result right here. So now all of our styling are now successfully applied to this component. So I can totally comment this line out, and now it's not going to give us any styling, and I can totally uncomment there, and here you can see we are now getting all of our styling. So yeah, this is how we are going to be styling our component by using an inline and separate object and also index.css file. And now let's talk about the icons, like how we are going to be adding icons in our project. To do that, there are a lot of icons libraries for React.js, but this one is a bit popular one, and this is a React.js icon library. So first of all, we have to install this library inside our project, then we will be able to use that. So now I'm gonna go into my React icons, and here you can see we have like a lot a lot of icons right here. So to install that, we are going to be using this command. So I'm gonna just copy there, and now I'm gonna open my terminal right here and just close every single thing. I'm gonna just place my command right here, which is npm install react icons --save. So if you don't want to provide this --save, you don't even have to do that. Okay, so I'm gonna just hit enter right here, so it's gonna install that inside this project, and here you can see that's now successfully installed. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, that if we install any third-party libraries or packages, that's going to be available inside this node module. So I can totally search for the React icons. So you know, if I just search for the icons, and here you can see we have our React icons right here. So if I open there, here you can see we have like a lot of icons. So this is how we are going to be adding that to our project. And now let's talk about how we are going to be using that inside our project. So to use that, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import that specific icon which you want to use. So I'll just go ahead and search for a specific icon. So I'm going to go to the home. There are a lot of icons. I'm going to search for the cart, and here you can see it's going to give us a lot of cards right here. Let's suppose if I want to use this card, I'm going to click on there. Now I can totally copy there, and here you can see this is how we are going to be importing there, and now we can totally use there by using this icon. So I'm going to copy that from here. Now let me just place that right in here, save my file, and now if I go there, refresh there, we have to run our terminal. So npm run dev. Now if I refresh there, so here you can see we're now getting our icon. Now I can search for something else like I don't know, computer or something, and it's going to give us this computer. I can totally copy there. I'm going to go to the top, and I'm going to just place it right here. I'm going to copy there from there. Now let me just place the here and close it, save my file, check it out, and we are now getting our computer right here. So yeah, that was it about the styling and also about the icons. Welcome to the styling challenge. So in this challenge, I want you to create a style card.jsx file, and inside there you're going to be defining the functional component with the name of style card, and use the inline style. Here the keyword is use the inline style to style your component. So by using the inline style, you have to change the background color to light blue, also provide a padding of 20 pixel, provide a border radius of 10 pixel, and also change the color of the text to like dark blue or something like that. Okay, so that's going to be the first portion of this challenge. And now for the second portion, we are going to be creating our profile card, And now inside this profile card component, we're going to be defining our style by using the object. And here the keyword is the object. Okay, so inside that object, we're going to be defining our style. Like the background color will be set to light gray, the padding will be set to 15 pixel, border radius will be set to 8 pixel, and text color will be set to totally black. Okay, so apply those styling by using inline CSS, and also by using the object. Okay, and then finally for the final portion, you're going to be installing the React icons by using this command, and then you have to render this FABR icon. That's gonna be it. You can also provide the size to there like 30 pixel, and you can also change the color. And yeah, finally you have to render the inside your app component, or register the inside your app component so you can see the result. So now let me just go ahead and create my component right here. So I'll start by defining the style card.jsx component. Let's just use our RAFCE, go back and go to my app component, and inside there we are going to be registering our style card like so. And inside this style card, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to show all of these stylings. So set the background color to light blue, and also provide a padding, radius, and change the color of there. So I'm going to remove this stuff from here and provide a style and use my double curly braces inside there. Once we have to change the background color, so I'll use like background color, and for the background color we are going to be providing like light blue, and also we have to provide the padding, and padding will be set to 20 pixel. We're going to be we are going to be also providing the border radius, not border right, but radius. Border radius will be set to 10 pixel, and we are going to be also providing the color, and the color will be set to dark blue. Okay, so I'm gonna save my file. I'm gonna also provide my h1, which will say like style, or yeah, style card. We're going to be also providing a paragraph which will say lorem 20, or maybe lorem 30 would be fine. So if I save my file, and now let me check this out. So we are now getting this style component by using the inline style. So that's looking amazing. I'm gonna also go ahead and go to my components folder one more time, and we're going to be defining our profile card.jsx inside there. I'm going to use my RAFCE, go to my app component, and comment this line. Oh, I'm not going to comment this line out. I'm going to be using a profile card and render there right here inside this component. Now for this one, we are going to be defining these styles to it. First, we have to change the background color to light gray. We also have to provide a padding, border radius, and also our text color will be set to totally black. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define all of that styling by using my style object. So I'll use like styles, and inside there we're going to be providing our background color. And let's just provide our light gray inside there. We're going to be also providing a padding which will be set to 15 pixel, and the border radius, radius, border radius will be set to 8 pixel. And let's just provide a color, and that's the default color which will be set to black. And now we have to use the styling inside our card. So how can I go about doing that? Well, we just have to provide a style and one curly braces, not twice but only one curly braces, and we have to render our styles inside there. I'm going to remove this profile card and provide my h1 which will say hello world. And now underneath there, let's just provide our paragraph which will say like lorem of 30. So I'm going to save my file, and now we are getting a gray card and also this card. So both of these stuff are now totally done. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to install the React icons. So I'm going to stop my server, and I'm going to be using npm I, or you can also use npm install if you wanted to, but I'm going to use like npm I and then React icons. Now they're successfully installed, so I'm going to run my server once again and go into my components folder and define another component which will say like icon component.jsx. So I'll use like RAFCE inside there, and here the first thing that we have to do is that we have to import the FA component or FABR component. So we are going to be grabbing there from the React icons, and we are going to be grabbing there from the FA. So I'll just use like FABR, and I'm going to render there right here inside this component. So I'll use like FABR and just render that here, save my file, and now we are getting, oh, we are not getting there. Let me just refresh there. We should be getting there. Oh, we are not. Oh, that's because we did not render our component here. So I'm going to use like icon component, there we go, and save my file. And now we are getting this beer icon right here, as you can see. Now let me just duplicate this line of code, and I'm going to also change the size of that to like 30. Save my file. So it's going to give us like a bit bigger beard now in this case. I can also change the color of that to provide a color attribute to it. So I'll just use like gold and save my file. And here you can see we are now getting a gold beard. So yeah, that was it about for the styling challenge. Now let's talk about how we are going to be adding events to our elements. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be creating our button component. And now inside this button component, we are going to be only returning just a simple button which will just say click. And now I'm going to render them inside my app. So I'll just use my button and save my file. And here you can see we are now getting our click button right here, which is not doing anything for now. So now if you want to attach an event handler for this button, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to write the on. And here you can see we have a lot of events like on abort capture, on animation end, and there are a lot of events right here on blur and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just write my own click event handler, and I'm going to just pass some sort of a function right here. So now inside this function I can just log to the console like you clicked me, and now I'm going to save my file. And now if I open my console right here, now I'm going to click on this button and it's going to give us like you clicked me right here. Why is that? Because now we are attaching this event handler and we are just logging to the console like you clicked me. We can also extract this logic to a separate function. So I'm going to extract that from here. And now we can just only create a separate function like const handle click. And now we can just log to the console something like math.round and then math.random. And let's just divide that by 10 or multiply that by 10. So if I save them, now I'm going to copy that and we are going to be passing the reference of that function to this on click event handler. So if I save that, now if I refresh that, and anytime I click on this button, it's going to give us a random number between 1 through 10. Okay, so yeah, this is now working. That was the first example. Now let me give you one more example. So to do that, we are going to be creating yet another component, or you know what, let me just remove that component from here, and I'm going to create my copy component. And then now inside there, we are going to be just returning only the paragraph, and which will just say, come on, let's just return a paragraph which will just have like lorem of 20. And I'm going to save this file right here. Now I'm going to attach my own copy event handler right here, and we are going to be also creating this function like copy handler in a second. So I'm going to copy there, and now let me just create this function inside this copy component. So I'll just use like const copy handler, and now inside there I'll just log to the console like stop stealing my content. So if I save there, and now if I just refresh there, we are getting some sort of error. That's because instead of that button, I'm gonna have to provide a copy right here. I'll just remove that and change that to that copy function, copy component, save my file. And now if I just refresh there, and here you can see we are now getting our text. But if I just select some portion of this text, right click on there and copy there, it's gonna give us that warning like stop stealing my content, which is looking amazing. So this is how we are going to be working with the on copy event handler. Now let me give you one more final example, and I guess that's going to be here. So I'll just remove that component from here. I'm going to also remove this copy from here, and now let me give you the move. So not movie but just move component. And now inside them we are going to be returning once again our paragraph, and that paragraph will have the content of like lorem 20. And now I'm going to be attaching my own mouse move. Okay, so when somebody mouse over or hover over this text, so we are going to be firing some sort of an event. So to do that, I'm going to just provide my move handler function, which we are going to be creating in a second. Now let me just create that function right here. So we can either create that by using this function result keyword, or we can create that by using the arrow function. So it's not going to take any perimeter, and we are going to be alerting, and I'll just say like mouse move event fired. And now underneath that, we can just log to the console like mouse move event fired. That's same thing. So if I save my file, and now if I just refresh there, but first of all, we are going to also have to register there inside our app. So let's just register there right here. So if I save my file and watch what happens. So whenever I hover my mouse over to there, first of all, I'm getting like mouse move event fired. If I click on OK, we are also getting in the console like mouse move event fired. So this is how we are going to be attaching different kind of events to our specific elements. In this section, I'm going to be introducing two topics at once: First, we're going to be learning about the state, and then we're going to be jumping into the hook. So now let's talk about what is a state and why you should even care about that. So state is a way to store and manage the data that can change over time and affect how the component renders. We define state by using something called the useState hook, which allow you to set the initial value and provide a way to update that state. So that was just a quick definition of what a state is, but now here is a keyword, the useState hook. So now what is a hook and why you should even care about that? So hooks are a new addition in React 16.8. They let you use state and other React.js features without writing a class-based components. So back in the day, not that long ago, we were using a class-based component like everywhere. Nowadays, we only use functional-based component and nobody use a class-based component. So hooks were introduced in the React.js 16 version, and they allow you to manage your state inside the functional component. So that's the only theory that you have to keep in mind about the hooks, and there are a lot of hooks which we are going to be covering throughout this series. But now in this section we are going to be learning about what a useState is and how it works. So now let's talk about what is a useState. So useState hook allows us to track the state in the functional component, and state generally refer to the data or the properties that need to be tracking in our application. So that's the only thing that you have to keep in mind about the useState. So how the syntax will look like. So here you can see, first of all, we are going to be using our useState hook, and then we are going to be using the array destructuring. And first of all, we have a data which we are going to be providing inside our useState, and then we have a function which will allows us to change that data inside our useState. Okay, so you know what, that's a lot of theory. Now let me just write some code and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. Now let's talk about the state and the useState hook. So to do that, first of all, we have to import the useState in our project. So this is how we are going to be importing there. And now let's use the useState hook inside our project. So I'm going to be using like const counter, and that's going to be equals to the useState, and the initial value will be set to 0. Okay, and now I'm going to just log this counter to the console. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting two things. The first thing that we are getting is the initial value which we specified inside this useState right here, and the second thing that we are getting is a function which will allows us to change this initial value. Okay, so if I specify like my own name like Hussein Web Dev, and I'm gonna save there, and now if I just refresh there, what am I getting? I'm getting Hussein Web Dev as my name, which is the initial value for my state, and I'm also getting this function which will allow me to change this value. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. So the best and the convention way to use this useState is to destructure that by using the array destructuring. Why is that? Because this is not an object, this is array. So in this situation we are going to be using the array destructuring to destructure our initial value and also this function. So we are going to be destructuring this initial value to use this somewhere, and we are going to be also destructuring this function to change the value of this state. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this counter, and I'm going to be using the array destructuring syntax right here. So now here you can pass anything that you want, but in my case I'm going to just give it the name of like count, and then we have to provide the comma, and we're going to be also destructuring that function as well. So to destructure that, the convention is to use the set and then provide the name for your initial value. So now in this case we specify this count, so we are going to be passing our count right here. So if we were like passing some sort of a apple maybe, so we are going to be passing like set apple. So this is just a convention. If you want to follow there, you totally can, but you don't have to. This should be an apple. There we go. Okay, so now I'm working with my count, so I'm going to just pass my count right here, and then the convention I'm going to follow will be the set count. There we go. And the initial value I'm going to specify only 0 right here inside there. And now if I save there, the next thing that I want to do is that I want to render what I currently have inside this state. So I'm going to just write my h1, and here I'll just pass my count variable which we are now destructuring from our useState. So if I save there, and as you can see right here, we are now getting this 0, which is looking amazing. So if I change that to like, I don't know, maybe 100 and save there, and now we are getting this 100 right here. So that's amazing. Now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to somehow change the value of this initial state. So initially we specify the value of 0 to there, but now you want to change that to like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 100 or something like that. So to do that, we are going to be creating our button. So I'll just create my button right here, and I'm going to just pass like plus right here, or I can just say plus, but you know what, that plus symbol would be fine. and now I'm going to be attaching the event handler on there, which will be the on click. So when somebody clicks on that button, so we are going to be firing this function, which is the increment function. So I'm going to copy the name of this function, and now let me just create this function right here. So I'll just use like const increment, and this function will only take the set count. And remember, this set count is a function which will allows us to change the value of our counter or our initial state. Okay, so I'm going to just execute this function right here. And now how we are going to be changing the value of our function. So if I just write like count plus 1, and now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our button, and now if I click on there, anytime I click on there, it's going to increment my counter by 1. So let me just refresh there. 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now I can also duplicate this line of code, and I'm going to just change that to minus, and I'm going to also create a function for the decrement. So decrement, and I'm going to copy their function name. I'm going to duplicate this line of code. I'm going to place the name of my function, and instead of a plus, I'm going to change that to minus. So if I save there, now we have our decrement button as well. So if I click on there, anytime I click on there, it's going to decrement my counter by 1. Now I know a lot of people will ask me like, Hussein, can we change the value of this count without using this set count? So you know what, let me just do that. I'm going to remove that from here, and now let me just use my count plus 1 instead of providing that set count and stuff. So I'll just use like count minus 1, and now I'm going to save my file. So if I save my file and refresh there, now if I click on there, here you can see behind the scene this counter is updating, the UI is not updating. Why is that? Because the set count method will allows us to change the value of our state, and anytime we change the value of our state, our component will re-render. I want you to keep that in mind. Anytime we change the value of our function, or not a function but a state, by using the set count method or any set method, it's gonna re-render our application. But now in this case, it will not re-render our application. It will still change the value of our state, but it will not re-render our application. Okay, so this is not allowed. This is a big no-no in React.js. You cannot change the state of your application without using the set method. Like, you have to use this. So I'm gonna copy there, and now let me just wrap there like so. Okay, so I'm gonna also use my set counter right here, and let's just close there like this way. So I'm going to save my file, and once again if I click on this button, so it's going to increment there, and this one will decrement or decrement there. Now let me give you one more example of how we are going to be updating our array of content. So once again, we are going to be importing our useStat, and then we are going to be creating our stat. So I'll just use like useStat, and the initial value I'm going to specify array right here. So for the first one, we are going to be providing Alex, and I'm going to also provide a John as my friends, and I'm going to store that inside my variables. And I'm going to be also using my array destructuring, so I'll just use like friends and also set friends right here. This is just a convention. If you want to follow that, you are more than welcome to follow that, but if you don't want to follow that, you don't have to. Now inside this section, I'm going to be using my friends. Now let's just iterate over through each friend, and we're going to be providing our friend right here, or just a f would be fine. And now inside there, we're going to be using our li. Let me just use my li right here, and we are going to be rendering our friend. Okay, so for the key, I'm going to pass like math.random, and that's going to be fine. So if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting Alex and also John, which is looking amazing. So now the next thing that I want to do is that I want to add a new element or add a new friend to this list. So how can I go about doing that? To do that, I'm going to just create a button right here, and now I'll just give it the name of like add new friend or something. Friend would be fine. Come on, friend, there we go. And I'm going to be attaching the event handler, which will be on click. Add one friend would be fine. So I'm going to copy there, and now let me just add that friend by using this function. So I'll just use my add one friend, and here we are going to be creating our arrow function. And now in this case, to mutate this array or to change something inside this array, we're going to be using our set friend. So I'm going to just call this function right here. And now inside there, first of all, we're going to be getting like all of the friends which we currently have. We don't want to change the existing data inside this array, but we want to add yet another new friend. So this is how we are going to be cloning the existing data inside our state or our array, and then we're going to be adding a new one. So I'll just pass like my own self, like Hussein web dev, and now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting like add new friend button, and now if I click on that, so it's going to also add there right here. So this is how we are going to be updating or mutating our array. Now let me show you how we are going to be removing a specific person from this list. So to do that, I'm gonna just create here another button which will say like remove one friend or something, and I'm gonna also paste the on click event handler on there which will say like remove friend. Okay, so I'm gonna copy there and let me create that function right here. So I'm gonna be creating my remove function, and let's just use our set friend one more time. And now here we're going to be using our friends, and now we're going to be using a filter method because we want to filter out that specific person, and then we want to just remove that. So I'll just paste like my callback function right here. So if that specific friend is not equals to John, we only want to remove that John. So we don't want to remove anything else, we only want to remove this John. So if I save my file, and now here you can see we have like Alex and also John. So if I add there, now it's going to remove this John from this list. So if I click on there, and here you can see it's going to remove that John. So this is the second way. Now let me show you the final way, which is how we are going to be updating a specific friend. So yeah, let me just show you them. I'm going to create a button, and which will say like come on, update one friend, and I'm going to also attach my event handler on there which will say like update one, or update one friend would be fine. I'm going to copy there, and let's just create that function right here. We're going to be still using our set friends, and now here we have to specify our friends.map because we want to iterate over through all of the friends that we currently have. And now we just have to use like if friend is equals to Alex. So in that case we just want to change his name to like Alex Smith or something like that. But if that's not the case, we only want to provide that specific name. Okay, so here we are using a ternary operator like if our friend is equal to Alex, so we just want to change his name to Alex Smith. But if that's not the case, we just want to return all of the overall friends. Okay, so now I'm gonna save my file, and here you can see we have like Alex, and we also have like Hussein Web Dev. So if I just refresh there, add my own self, and now I want you to notice this Alex. So if I click on update one friend, so it's gonna change the name of this Alex to Alex Smith. So this is how we are going to be using a use state with array of content. Now that was about the number. We also learned about how we are going to be updating the array, but now let's talk about how we are going to be updating the object. So I'll just use like import and then use state. I'm going to import that right here, and now let me just use like const movie, or just movie would be fine, and then set movie. Okay, so we are going to be using our used, not transition, god damn it, use state, and here we are going to be specifying our object. And for the object, we're going to be specifying like the title of the movie, which will be one of my favorite movie, Equalizer 3. And then we're going to be also providing our ratings for that. So ratings will be set to 7. I'm going to save my file. So this is how we are going to be initially providing our content for our state. And now let me render there right here to the UI. So I'll just use like h1, and here we're going to be using like movie dot title, and then we are going to be also using paragraph of movie dot rating. So if I save there, so here you can see we are now getting the movie title, and we are also getting the rating. So I'll just change that to ratings. There we go, and change this one to the title. Now that's looking better. So now the next thing that I want to do is that I want to create a button which will update the rating of this movie. So I'll just write like change rating, write my own click event handler which will say handle click. I'm gonna copy there, and here we're going to be creating that function right here, const handle click. And now inside this function, we are going to be updating only the ratings, nothing else but only the ratings. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be making a copy of our stat. So to make a copy of our stat, so we can use like copy movie, and now here inside there we can use dot 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 and movie. Like we want to take the title and also the ratings. So this is how we are going to be making a copy of our movie. Then we can specify the comma and what thing you want to change. So I'll just write like ratings, and then we want to change there to 5. So this is how we are going to be making a copy of our movie, and this is how we can change a specific thing inside that movie or inside that object. Okay, and now we are going to be using our set movie, which is the function which allows us to change this stat. And I'm going to specify my copy movie right here. If I save my file, and here you can see if I click on this button, so it's going to change the ratings to 5 right here, which is amazing. But this is the longer way of doing things. But we can totally refactor this code to use a shorthand. So I'm going to just comment this line out, and I'm going to just cut that from here. And instead we are going to be using the object. I'm going to use dot 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 movie and then comma ratings, and I'm going to just specify 5 right here. So this is just a shorter way of writing all of that stuff. So I'm going to just refresh there, and click on the change rating. So it's going to also change the ratings to 5. And let's just remove that from here. And now that's looking better. We can also remove these curly braces. We don't need that. That's looking cool. And yeah, that's looking better. So that was how we are going to be using the useStat with object. But in some situation, we would have like array of objects. So how can you go about doing that? We are going to be using our useStat first of all, and inside there, we are going to be passing the array of objects. So inside each object, we're going to be passing the ID, which will be set to 1, and title will be like, I don't know, some sort of a movie name like Spider-Man. And I'm going to also specify the ratings to there, and rating will be set to 3. I'm going to duplicate there and change the rating to 6, and change the movie title to Superman, and also the ID will be set to 2. So now in this case, we have array of objects right here. And now if you want to modify that, how can you go about doing that? So to do that, first of all, we have to store that in some sort of a stat. So I'll just use like movies and then set movies, and that's going to be equals to this useStat function right here. So if I save that, the next thing that we have to do is that we have to iterate over through each element inside this array, and we have to render that. And I'm going to just go into my section, and inside this section, I'll use my movies.map, and I'm going to only pass my M for the movie, like for each of the movie. And now inside there, we are going to be using our li. Let me just use them manually, and I'm going to pass my movie.title, or not movie, but just the m.title would be fine. And I'm going to also provide the key, and that will be like math.random, and provide my random key to it. Now underneath there, we're going to be creating a button which will say like change name, and we're going to be also attaching the event handler on there, which will say like handle click. I'm going to copy that from here, and let's just create that function right here. So I'll just use like const handle click, and in this case, once again, we're going to be using the set movies, and it's going to allow us to change our stat. And here we are going to be passing our movies, and I'm going to be using the map method to iterate over through each movie. And let's just use our m for each of the movie. So if m.id is equals to 1, so in that situation, we just want to change the movie. First of all, we are going to be making a copy of all of the movies, and then we only want to change the title to John Wick 4, or maybe 5 would be fine. And now outside from there, what am I doing? Okay, so now outside from there, we are going to be closing our ternary operator and just provide m right here. So now let me just explain this code. First of all, we are now iterating over through each movie, and we are now storing there in m. And now we are checking if the movie ID is equals to 1. We are only checking the first movie. So if that's the case, so what do we have to do? We have to make a copy of our entire stat movies, and we only want to change the name of the first movie to John Wick chapter 5. Okay, so if that's not the case, we just want to return all of the movies. That's exactly what we are doing right now. If I save my file, and let me just refresh there, and if I click on the change name, it's going to change there to John Wick chapter 5. So yeah, this is how we are going to be iterating over through the entire list array of stat. And now this is how we are going to be mutating that stat, or changing that stat, or updating that stat. So that's cool and everything, but now in some situation we would want to share our stat into other component. So how can you go about doing that? First of all, we are going to be importing our useStat, and then I'm going to just create some sort of a stat like count, and also the set count, and that's going to be equals to the useStat, and the initial value will be set to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a few components. So I'll just create my components folder, and we have our component1.jsx, and we also have our component2.jsx. And now inside this component 1, I'm going to be using my RAFCE, save this file, and inside the component 2, we are going to be using our RAFCE2. And now I'm going to go into my app component, and we have to import our component, component 1, and we also have to import our component 2 as well right here. I'm going to save this file, and now inside this section, I'm going to call my component 1 first of all, and let's just execute there. And I'm going to also call my component, component 2, and I'm going to also execute there. Now I want to share this state into these components. So how can I go about doing that? Well, to do that, we are going to be using our prop system. So we can just say like count, and count will be that count, or that initial value of this state. So we are now passing our state from the app component, from the parent component, to the component 1, and also to the component 2 as a children component. Okay, so I'm gonna also pass my own click handler as a function name, and here we're going to be also passing our function inside this. So I can just say like set count, and here I'm gonna be just passing like count plus 1. I'm gonna save this file, and now I can totally copy all of that stuff from here, and now I can totally paste that right here. So I'm gonna save my file. Let me just say that once again. We are defining our state inside the app component, and we are now sharing there with the component 1 and also the component 2 by using this prop system. Okay, so now inside my component 1, we can now totally destructure there, and we can totally use our state from the app component inside the component 1. And to do that, I'm gonna first of all destructure my component. So I'll just use like count and also the own click handler right here, which is a function name. And now inside this component 1 div, I'm gonna just remove that and just write my paragraph and say like count. I'm gonna render my count inside there. I'm gonna also provide my button, and which will just say like increment, and I'm gonna pass my own click event handler on there, and then I'm gonna pass my handle click right here. I'm gonna copy there, go to the top, and here we have to just use our handle click. When somebody use them, we are going to be firing this function. Okay, so let's just execute this, save my file, and let me just show you. So here you can see we are now getting this from our paragraph. And now if I click on this, so it's gonna just update my count right here from the component B, from the child component. We are now updating the parent component. So that was the first way. Now I'm gonna go into my second component, or a component 2, or you know what, I'm gonna just copy this stuff from here. I'm gonna place that here. Inside this component 1, I'll provide my paragraph and render my count inside there. Let's just provide our button and increment here as well. And let's just use our own click event handle click event, copy there, go to the top, and use my const handle click, and we are going to be passing our on handle or on handler. Okay, so I'm gonna save my file, and now here you can see we have two components and they are updating each other. So if I click on there, and it's gonna update that right here. So why is that? Now our state is available inside the parent component, and we are now updating there from the child component. So this is the result that we are getting. So if I click on the increment, it's gonna increment there right here. So this is how we are going to be sharing our state by using the prop. I know we learned a lot about the use state, but still there is one final thing I want to talk about, which is how we are going to be passing an arrow function or just a function is the initial value for our use state. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my components folder, and I'm going to create a component with the name of example1.tsx, not a tsx but just a jsx, and I'm going to be using a rafce, and yeah, I'm going to render this component right here like example1, and I'm going to just render it there, save my file. Check this out, and here you can see we are now getting our example1 right here. Let's just remove this style and css, and now let's start working on this. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my state. So I'll just create a state with the name of count and also set count. It's going to be equals to this use state, and for the initial value, now we are going to be passing a callback function. Okay, just like that. So this callback function will only runs when our component first renders. So like any logic I put inside this callback function will only run on the first render. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to specify my initial count. So I'll use like initial count, and it's going to be equals to some sort of a 10 value, and I'm going to also return this initial count from this arrow function. So now let me just save there. Next we have to render there, so I'm going to just remove that from this UI, and I'm going to write my h1 which will say count, and here we have to render our count. Next we also have to create a button which will allows us to increment our counter. Okay, so I'll use like on click, and here we're going to be passing this increment function. So I'll just use like const increment, and inside this function we're going to be only using the set count and provide my previous count value to there. And next, come on, what the hell am I doing? Next we have to just use our previous count and plus only 1 to there. Now I'm gonna save my file, and as soon as I save my file and refresh there, and here you can see it's gonna give us 10 value as the initial value for this count right here. So now I can totally increment there, and I can do whatever I want to do with that. So yeah, that was the example number 1. Now let me give you one more example, which will be example 2.tsx jsx. What the hell am I saying? Let's use our rafc inside there. Also I want to render that inside my app component, so I'm going to comment this line out, and I'm going to render my component 2. Okay, component Okay, component 2 or example 2, not a component. So I'll use like example 2 and close there, save my file. Check this out. So here you can see we are now getting our example 2. So now the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my random number. So I'll use like random number and also set random number is going to be equals to this use stat once again. And for the initial value, we're going to be passing this callback function right here. Okay, so now inside this callback function, I'll just use like math.floor, and here I'm going to also provide like math.random, and then times 100 would be fine. So now if I save my file, oh, it should be just equal to sign. Okay, so it's going to give us a random function whenever this component first renders. So I'll just remove that from here, and I'm going to write my h1, which will say like random number, and then I'm going to render my random number. Okay, like so. So now if I save my file, and here you can see it's going to give us a 0. Let me just refresh this. It's going to give us 72. Refresh there once again. So anytime I refresh this, it's going to give us a random number. Now underneath this h1, I'll create a button which will say like generate new number or generate a new random number or something like that. And when somebody clicks on this button, we're going to be firing this function which is a generate new random number. Now let me copy there and I'll create this function right here. It's going to be an arrow function, and I'll just pass like new number, and that new number will be equals to math.floor, and also we have to specify math.random times 100 one more time, like 100, like so. And finally we're going to be setting that to our random stat. So here we have to specify our new number, and now if I save my file and whenever I refresh my page, it's going to give us a different random number. So I can also click on there. So now it's going to also give us a different random number. So that's also done. Now let me give you the final example, like example 3.jsx. I'll use my RAFCE inside there, like RAFCE, save my file, go into my app and render this component right now, like example 3, and close there. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to define my stat. So I'll just provide like name and set name, and it's going to be equals to the use stat. So let's just use our use stat, and for the initial value, we are going to be passing an arrow function. So first of all, we have to save some sort of a name to our local storage. So I'll just use like variable with name of like saved number or saved name to be precise, and that's going to be equals to the local storage. And here we want to use like get item, and we're going to be getting our item from our local storage if we have that. But if we don't have that, let's just use like saved name. If we have the saved name, so we just want to parse there, and we want to get that from our local storage. And if that's not the case, we just want to set the initial value to empty string. Now let me go to the UI and change that to my h1, or yeah, h1 would be fine. And here I'll just say like your name, and here we have to render our name, like this name right here. So now underneath this h1, I'll create an input field with the type of text, and I'm going to also provide the value, and the value will be coming from this stat, which is a name. And when somebody try to change something inside this, we're going to be firing this handle change function. And now I'm going to also provide the placeholder which will say like enter your name. Okay, and finally let me create a button which will say like clear name, and whenever somebody clicks on this button, we're going to be firing this handle clear function, which we're going to be creating in a few, or you know, let me just create that. First of all, we're going to be creating this handle change function, then we're going to be creating that clear function. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to fire this handle change function. It's going to take an event, and here inside this event we're going to be setting the name to event.target.value. Now I'm going to also use the use effect. So whenever our component first renders, so in that situation we just want to set our item, which will be a name, and we want to provide our json.stringify inside there and provide our new name to there. Okay, so I'll also provide a dependency array, and for the dependency array we are going to be providing a name. And now finally let me also create this handle clear function, and then inside this clear function we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but I will just write like set name, and the initial value will be empty string. Okay, so here you can see we have our name and stuff. So now let me open my console, go into my application. Oh my god, this is super white. I don't know why, but yeah, let me just right click on there and force that to a dark. God damn it, this is super white. So let me just go into local storage, and here whatever I type inside there, it's going to be putting it right here, but that value will be also stored inside my local storage. So whenever I refresh there, and here you can see that value will still be here. So now whenever I click on this clear name, so it's going to clear this out. So the whole point of this section was that we can also specify an arrow function or just a function to our useState. Welcome to the useState challenge. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create the counter.jsx file, and inside that file you're going to have to create the counter component and use the useState to manage a simple counter state. So first you will have to initialize the state by providing a 0 value to there, then create a button to increment your counter by 1, display the value of that counter so that we can see the result. So this is going to be the first portion of this challenge. So in the next portion you're going to have to create the to-do list.jsx file, and then you have to create a component with the name of to-do list, then use the useState once again to manage a simple state or array of to-dos inside that state. Initialize the state with empty array, then create a form to add a new to-do item in that list, then display the value of that to-do list, and that's going to be the second portion. So now for the third one, you're going to have to create your profile.jsx file, and inside that you're going to be defining the profile component. Once again, you're going to be using the useState to manage the object with the user profile information. So initialize the state with object containing the name and age, and provide the input field to update the name and also the age. Then finally display the updated information inside that component. So now for the fourth step, you're going to have to use the useState once again and create a shopping list.jsx file, also the shopping list component, then use the useState to manage the array of object where each object represents a shopping item, for example like the name and also the quantity. So initialize the state with the empty array and also create a form to add a new item to that array, and then finally display the list of shopping items. Okay, so yeah, this is how you're going to be importing therefore your app component so that you guys can see everything. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. Now I'm going to give you my solution. Let me create my counter.jsx file, and I'm going to be using the rafce. Save my file, go to my app and register there. Right here, let's just write our counter, hit enter, and just close this. So I'm going to save my file. I'm going to also run my server, which I'm already doing. So let me just do that once again. And now we are getting our counter, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to make a state. So I'll just use like useState. And as soon as I do this, so it's going to import that from the React.js. For the initial value, I'm going to specify 0 to them. And I'm going to be using the array destructuring to destructure the count and also the set count out of there. Now we are going to be using the count to show the initial value. So I'll just use like paragraph, and I will say like you clicked, and let me just render my count right here, count times. There we go. And also I'm going to provide a button which will allow us to change our state. So I'll just provide the name of like increment as a label, and whenever somebody clicks on that button, we are going to be firing this function which will allow us to change our data. So we are going to be using the set count, and now we are going to be providing the updated value. So I'll just write like count plus 1. Now let me just save my file. And if I click on this increment, so it's going to just increment my counter by 1. Okay, so that's cool, but we can also decrement our counter. So let me just change that to decrement, and instead of providing a plus, I'm going to change that to minus. So now I'm going to save my file, and now if I click on this decrement, so it's going to decrement my counter by 1. So yeah, that was the first portion of this exercise. Now we're going to be creating a to-do list. So I'll just create a component or a file with the name of to-do list, to-do list.jsx. I'll use my rafce inside there, save my file, go to my app and register there right here. So I'll use like to-do list, come on, like so, and close my file. And here you can see we're now getting our to-do list, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that we want to do is that we want to initialize our state. So I'll use like useState one more time, useState, there we go. And for the initial value, we're going to be specifying empty array inside there. Now let me just destructure my to-dos and also set to-dos out of there. And now underneath we're going to be also handling our form. So for form input, we're going to be creating a state for the like input value, and then set input, come on, input value as well, and that's going to be equals to the useState, and the initial value will be set to empty string. Now let's get into the UI. So I'm going to remove that from here, and I'm going to create my h1, which will just select to-do list. And now underneath this h1, we're going to be creating a form, and we're not going to be providing any action to that. So I'll just use like on submit. When somebody submit there, we're going to be firing a function which is called the handle submit, which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. And now inside this form, we are going to be defining our input field. For the value, I'll specify the input value, that state which we've already defined right here. So I'm going to copy there, and now let me just place the here like so. And I'm going to also provide the placeholder which will say like add a new to do. I'm gonna save my file right now, and we are not getting anything. That's because we did not register this component anywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and register there. Oh, we already did there, but why aren't we getting anything? Oh, you know what? We've provided this function, but we did not create this function, so that's why we are now getting that error. Underneath this input field, we're going to be defining our button, which will say like add to do, and the type will be set to submit. So it's going to allow us to submit our form. So now underneath this form, we would also need to render our to-dos. So for that, I'm going to be using a UL, and for this UL, we're going to be defining our to-dos. And now let me just iterate over through all of their to-do. So I'll just write like to do, and also the index right here. Okay, and inside there, we're going to be defining our li, and here we are going to be just providing our to do so that we can see our to do. We will also provide the key, and that's going to be set to that index which we are grabbing. We cannot see anything. That's because like we have to create this function. So I'm going to copy there, and let me just create this function right here. So I'll just use like const handle submit. It's going to take the event object. I'm going to also provide my curly braces, and let me just use like e.prevent, come on, prevent prevent default, to prevent the default behavior of that. And we are going to be also first of all checking the input value, and let's just provide our trim method on there. Like if you have empty spaces, so just totally remove them. Now we are going to be getting our set to do's like this one, and we're going to be changing the value of this. So how are we going to be doing that? To do that, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to make the copy of the existing item which are available inside this to do. So how are we going to be doing that? You guessed it, we're going to be using dot 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 and to do's. Next we have to provide our updated value. So for that updated value, we're going to be using like input value, and now underneath that we are going to be also emptying out our input field. So I'll just use like set input value and set there to empty string. Now that's done. So if I save my file, the next thing that we have to do is that we also have to bind another function right here to this input field. So when somebody change this, I'll use like on change, we're going to be firing this function which will be a handle change. So I'm going to copy that, and now let me define my function right here. So let's just create our handle change. It's going to take the event object one more time. Let's just provide our equal to sign there, and now we are going to be using like set input field, not that one. We're going to be defining our set input value, and it's going to take that event.target.value, like anything we specify inside this input field. So it's going to take that, it's going to show up right here to the input value. So now I'm going to save my file, and now let me write like I don't know, like walk the, come on, oh my god, walk the dog. Let me click on the add to do. So it's going to add that right here. You can also write like I don't know, and click on this. So it's going to add that right here to this to-do list. So yeah, that was another example of this to-do list. Next we have to create our profile. So I'll just create a component with the name of profile.jsx. I'll be using the RAFC inside there. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to initialize my profile or my state with a value of profile. So I'll use like use state, and the initial value will be set to this object, and I'm going to specify the name. Name will be set to totally empty string. We're going to be also providing an edge, and edge will be also set to totally empty string. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to destructure a few things out of there. So we're going to be destructuring the profile and also the set profile from this use state. So that's done. Next we have to go ahead and remove this profile from there, and I'm going to be using h2, and I'll say like user profile. And now underneath this h2, we're going to be creating our div, and inside their div, let's just provide our label, and we're not going to be providing any HTML4 values to this. So I'll just remove that from here, and I'm going to only say name. And now inside this label E1, we are going to be defining our input field. Okay, so the type will be set to text. We're going to be also providing the name, and name will be set to name. And let's just provide the value, and value will be coming from the profile dot name. Okay, so which is this profile dot name, which will be coming from there. And when somebody types something inside there, we're going to be firing this function which will say like handle change, ching. There we go. So we're going to be creating this function in a few seconds, but you know what, I'm gonna first of all take care of the rest of these labels and stuff. Okay, so underneath this div, let me define another div. We're going to be once again providing a label. We're not going to be providing any HTML4 value to them. And inside this label, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to provide my edge, and let's just provide our input field right here. So the type will be set to number. I'm going to provide the name of edge, and I'm going to also provide the value, and value will be set to profile.edge, which will be coming from my state. And when somebody change there, once again we are going to be firing this handle change function in a few seconds, which we are going to be creating. Okay, so now underneath this div, we're going to be using our h3, and I'll use like profile information. And now underneath this profile information, so I'll just like render all of that values which I'm going to be providing in my input field. So I'll just write like name, and I'm going to use like profile.name, and also I'm going to be creating a edge, and here we are going to be rendering the profile.edge. So now let me just save there, and finally let me just create this handle change function, and that's going to be it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to write like handle change. It's going to take the event object, and inside this function we are going to be destructuring like the name and also the value out of this event.target value, target. There we go. And we're going to be also using the set profile, and here we have to specify the previous one. So we're going to be using like previous profile, and it's going to take that event, it's going to take this callback function. So first of all we have to spread out the previous profile, and now we have to specify the new one. So we are going to be taking the name, and we have to provide the new value to there. Okay, so I'm going to save my file, and that's going to be it for this entire profile. Let me just show you this. So I'm going to refresh them. Oh, first of all we have to register them into our app component. So I'm going to comment this to-do list, and I'm going to register my profile component. There we go. Save my file, and now we are getting our profile component. So first, if I specify some sort of a name like Hussein, and it's going to add there right here for this name right here, I don't know, like 20 or 22 or something like that. So it's going to automatically add there right here for this profile information. So that was another one, and now let's talk about the final one, which will be the shopping list. So I'm going to comment this line out, and let me just go ahead and create my shopping list. So come on, shopping list.jsx. I'm going to be using my RAFCE, save my file, go to the app.js, and use our shopping list and render there. Save my file once again, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to initialize all of my state. So I'll just create like items and also set items, and that's going to be equals to use state, and the initial value will be set to empty. Now we're going to be also creating one for the name. So set name is going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to empty string. We're going to be also creating one for the quantity, and also set quantity. There we go. It's going to be equals to the use state, and we're going to be providing the empty string inside there. Now let me just go ahead and go to the UI and remove this shopping list from there. I'm going to write my h1, which will say like shopping list, and underneath this h1 let's just create our form. We're not going to be providing any action to them, but we are going to be providing the on submit handler, and when somebody submit there we are going to be firing this function. Okay, so let's just create our input field inside there. The type will be text, and we're going to be also providing a placeholder which will say like item name or something like that, and we're going to be also specifying the value, and value will be coming from the name. So I'm going to copy there, and let's just provide there right here. And when somebody try to change them, we are going to be firing this function. So I'll just use like set name, and I'm going to write like event.target value. So I'm going to save my file, and that's going to be it for this first input field. And now we can totally duplicate this. So I'm going to select there and duplicate them. Here we have to change the type to number. We also have to change that to quantity. So quantity, there we go. We also have to specify the value like quantity, and also the set quantity. There we go. Okay, so that's going to be it. Now underneath that we are going to be also creating a button which will say like add item, and here we have to specify the type, which will be set to submit in lowercase submit. There we go. Now that's cool and everything, but the final thing that we have to do is that we have to show our shopping list. This is how we are going to be creating our shopping list. We are going to be providing a name of our item. We are going to be also providing a quantity, and when somebody clicks on this button, so it's going to add there, but we also have to show that quantity and also the name. So to show them, we're going to be using our UL, and inside this UL we're going to be using like items.map, and we have that items which we have declared up above. We have all of that items right here. It's going to take the item, and it's going to also take the index as well, and inside there we're going to be providing our li, and it's going to take the key, and key will be coming from the index. And for the value we are going to be using like item.name, and then we are going to be also providing the quantity quantity, and quantity will be item.quantity. There we go. Or you know what, let me just change there to semicolon. So I'm going to save my file. Next we have to create our handle submit function, which we've specified right here. So let me just go ahead and create there. I'm going to be using like handle submit. It's going to take the event object, Inside there, we are going to be preventing the default behavior first of all. And now inside there, let's just check if we don't have the name or if we don't have the quantity. So in that situation, we are going to be only returning like nothing basically. So we just want to stop our execution there. If that's not the case, and if we only have like either the name or the quantity, so in that situation, we are going to be creating our new object, which will say like new item, item, there we go. And we're going to be creating our new item object. It's going to take the name. We're going to be also providing the quantity, but in this case we can also just write like quantity just like so. We can even remove one of them if you wanted to, but now in this situation we are going to be converting our quantity to a number. So to convert that to number, we are going to be using the parse integer, and here we have to specify our quantity. So now let me just save there, and this is how we are going to be creating our new item, and we have to now set that to this set items. So I'll just go ahead and use my set items. This is provide our previous items, and here we are going to be using, first of all, let's just clone our previous items. And come on, what the hell am I doing? Let me just clone this previous item and also provide a comma there and use my new item right here. Okay, and also we are going to be clearing the input field, so we are going to be using like set name and also the set quantity, and let's just provide empty string for all of them. Now that's totally done. I'm gonna save my file. Check this out. So we have our shopping list, so I can just write like computer, and that's gonna be like 3000 or something like that. I can't even speak no more. God damn it. Let me click on this add item. Now it's gonna give us the name of the item, and it's gonna also give us the quantity, and quantity is that much. So I can just write like basically anything I want, and I can add that, and here you can see I'm now getting that same result. So yeah, that was a huge challenge, but I hope that was worth it. Because use state is the most important thing in React.js, and you have to make sure that you master the use state. So that was a huge challenge about the use state, and you even build like 3 or 4 challenges, or maybe a projects to be precise. So I can totally uncomment all of them, and now let me show you all of them. And here you can see we can now increment and also decrement. We can also add a new to do. We can also just provide a name and also the age if you wanted to, and shopping list, you name it. Okay, so we would be totally getting our value, which is now added. So now let's talk about the React portal. So what do I mean by React portal? React portal is a feature that allows you to render a child component into a DOM node that exists outside the hierarchy of the parent component. So this can be useful for scenarios like whenever we are creating a model or tooltips or drop-down menus where you want to break out of the usual parent-child structure and render in a different part of the DOM. Okay, so you can think about the portal is just like the Rick and Morty portal. Okay, so which will allow you to go to anywhere inside your DOM. So that was just a basic theory, and now let's get into the coding, and then you will get to know what I'm talking about. So to learn about the React portal, first of all, we are going to be creating a components folder, and inside this folder we are going to be defining our copy input.jsx file, and inside this file we are going to be creating our array.fce, save my file, go to my app, and render this component right here. Okay, so I'll use like copy input and close that. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to just make a simple component. So I'll just create a state with the name of like input value. Come on, input value. It's going to also take a set input value. So we're going to be setting that to the use state, and for the initial value we're going to be providing only empty string. Okay, we're going to be also creating yet another set for the copied, and then set copied like so. It's going to be equals to the use state once again, and for the initial value we're going to be specifying false today. Okay, that's also done. Now let's get into the UI, and I'm going to remove this copy input text from here, and I'm going to create my input field inside there. God, this keyboard is super fast. I'll provide the value, and the value will be coming from the input value which we are creating up above. And whenever somebody try to change something inside this, we are going to be firing this function and providing our set input field right here, and the initial value will be set to event.target.value. And yeah, I guess that's going to be fine, but we're going to be also creating a button which will say like copied or copy would be fine. Okay, so whenever somebody clicks on this button, we're going to be firing this copy or handle copy function. So now let me copy that and create this function right here. So I'll use like const handle copy, create this arrow function right here. So we're going to be using like navigator, navigator. This is a JavaScript function, so we have to use like clipboard property on there, and you want to write text to there. Okay, so I'll use like write text, and here we have to specify our input value, and also we want to use the then method because we're going to be delaying there. Okay, so let's just use our then method, and inside there we're going to be providing a set copied and provide true to them. We also have to use our set timeout, and here we have to specify our callback function, and for this callback function we're going to be providing our set copied, which will be set to false. You want to just set that to false, and also you want to provide 2 seconds of delay to them. So now let me just save my file and check this out. So here you can see we have our input field. I can type whatever I want to type inside there. If I write like Hussein web dev, and now if I click on this copy, and if I go into the new tab and place it right here, so here you can see we are now getting our Hussein web dev right here, which is cool. Now the next thing that we want to do is that we want to create our pop-up content.jsx component, and I'm going to be using my RAFC inside there. So let me just paste this copied as a prop to this function. So here I'm going to be rendering my pop-up component. Let's just close there, and we're going to be passing this copied as this copied prop right here. Now let me go ahead and grab there by using the destructuring. So now let me just save my file, and now I'm going to change that to a section. So I'll just write a section right here. What the hell was that? This keyboard is super fast. So now let me just change that to a section. God, SACTIO, and there we go. Okay, and I'm gonna also change this label, and here we have to check if we copied the content, so which means you want to show this UI. So I'll use like div. Inside this div I'll write like copied to clipboard, like so. Okay, so now let me just save my file, but I also want to provide a bit of styling to this, so I'll use like style, and here for the style we're going to be providing a position, and position will be set to absolute, and we also want to provide a bottom, and bottom will be set to only 3 rems. Now let me go ahead and check this out. So now let me just refresh there, and if I type anything inside there and I click on this copy button, it's going to show us this copy to the clipboard, and then it will disappear. Let me try there once again. If I click on this copied, so it's going to show us this copied content, and then it will make it disappear. So yeah, that's cool and everything, but now let me show you the DOM tree. If I open my console, I mean like the element, let me go to the body, let me also go to the root. So here you can see all of our content. Let me just zoom in a bit. All of our content is now available inside this root, and this root is coming from this index.html file. So here you can see we have a div, and inside this div we have the ID of root. We are now selecting there, and we are now rendering all of our content to that root right here. But let's suppose if we don't want to render our content to this div, so let's suppose if we want to render our content to the body or somewhere else, so how in the world we are going to be doing there? So to do that, you guessed it, we are going to be using the React portal. So first of all, we are going to be importing the React portal. So I'll use like import and then create portal, and we are going to be getting there from the React DOM, not from the React.js, but from the React DOM. Okay, so first of all, you have to import this create portal, and now to use them, this is how we are going to be using them. So now let me just call this create portal right here, and here the first thing that we have to do is that we have to specify what content you want to render. Trying to render the h1 or any kind of content that you want to render. That's going to be the first parameter. Next, you also have to specify where you want to render them. So I'll just use like something else, but first of all, I'm going to go ahead and go into my index.html file, and here I'm going to just render like some sort of a div which will have like pop up content or something like this. So here you can see I define my own div with the ID of pop-up content. I'm gonna copy that from here, and now let me go ahead and provide a comma there once again. So I'll just provide a comma here, and now we have to select that div. So I'll use like document dot query selector, not selector all, but just a query selector, and inside this query selector we want to access that div which we just created right here. So first of all, we have to provide this pound symbol, and then we have to specify this pop-up content. So now if I save my file and refresh there, and what are we getting? We are now getting this pop-up content. Now if I expand there, inside there we have our section. So inside there, here you can see we have our section, and this section is currently empty because we did not copy our content. So here you can see if I just type something, and as soon as I click on there, it's going to render my content right here, and then it will make it disappear. So you know what, let me provide a bit more delay to this. So let's just change that to 5 seconds would be fine. So now if I save my file, and now let me just paste like Hussein web dev, and now if I click on this copy, and here you can see if I expand there, and yeah, we are now getting this div. Let me try that once again. Expand there. Yep, we are now getting this copied to the clipboard. So yeah, this is how we are going to be rendering our content to another part of our DOM by using the React portal. So we've already seen keys in the list section, but I want to explain there a bit more. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder, and inside this folder I'm going to create a switcher.jsx, and I'll just write my RFC inside there and register there right here inside my app component. Switcher, there we go. Now let me go ahead and go to my component, and first I'm going to create a stat with the name of SW for a switcher, and then set SW. It's going to be equals to this use stat once again, and we're going to be providing the initial value of false to there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to render my dark and light mode. So I'll just provide there like so. So I'll use like SW if we have there. In that situation, we want to provide one UI, but if we don't have there, we want to provide another UI. So I'll just write like a span, and this span will say dark. Okay, but if that's not the case, we want to provide yet another with the text of light to it. Okay, so now let me just save there. So that's also done. We also have to provide a BR for a breaking, and now underneath that, we're going to be creating an input field with the type of text, and now underneath this input, we want to create a button, and which will say like switch, SWITCH, and when somebody clicks on this button, we want to change that. So I'll use like set switch or set SW to be precise. Let's just provide our S and not S. You guys already know all of that stuff. So let me just explain that once again. Here you can see we are now rendering this content totally dynamically. Then we have a BR, then we also have an input field and also a button which allows us to switch between the dark and light mode. Okay, so this is how it will look like. So if I click on this, it's going to make it dark. If I click on there once again, so it's going to make it light. Let's suppose if I type something inside this input field, and if I click on this switch, and here you can see that input field will stay the same. Even though we changed it to dark, but this input field still have this value. So to make that totally unique, so for that we can provide a key. So what I'm going to do is that here I'm going to pass a key, and this key will take our state, which is a SW. So if that is the case, we are going to be providing a dark, but if that's not the case, we are going to be providing a light. Now we are providing a unique value to this specific input field. So if we have some sort of a value, so if our input field is set to true, it's going to make it dark, but if that's not the case, we are going to be getting a light. This is now set to dark. Let me change that to light, and if I type something inside this input field and click on this switch, here you can see that value is now successfully gone. We are not storing them in some sort of a local storage or in some sort of a database, so that's why value is now successfully gone. Okay, so now if I type something inside this input field once again, so it's going to remove all of that value from this input field. Okay, so this is how we are going to be making our specific element or a component totally unique by providing a key to them. If I change that to something else like I don't know, like placeholder or something like that, let me just write a placeholder. Okay, and now if I save my file, and here you can see it's now set to light. If I type something inside there and switch there, that value will still be there. Why? Because we are using a placeholder and not a key. So if I convert that to key, and if I type something inside this input field, so it will remove that from here because this input field is no longer that old one. Okay, so